others, we'll see. We're talking about one next year.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting for Monday, June 3rd. 3 study sessions on the docket tonight. Up first is Director of Finance Kevin Engels here to discuss the monthly review for April.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Director of Finance. Tonight we're going to review the April 2024 General Fund Financial Report. Not a lot new happening this month, so I will keep it brief. I know you have a heavy agenda tonight. So for the general fund revenues and expenditures, we're tracking at about a third of the budget, and we're a third of the way through the year, so we're on track there. On the revenues, once again, about a third of the way through, up about $500,000 from last year, or about 2.4%. Expenditures a third of the way, exactly a third of the way through the year for this year. Two things to mention on this slide. We've split the city clerk and city manager's offices. We overlooked that earlier in the year, but city clerk is their own department now, so we have them listed separately. And you'll notice Public Works, this will be an ongoing theme throughout the year. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but their expenditures are higher. That's offset by charges for services revenues, and that's related to the city center property management. This is breaking the expenditures down by category. See, everything's tracking, like I mentioned, debts or capital is a little bit lower. That's tied to vehicle replacement schedules, so we're just buying a few less vehicles this year. Put your revenues and expenditures together and you get your operating either surplus or deficit. We're at about 1.2 million deficit this year. And as history would tell us, that does tend to flatten out and either be eliminated or reduced by the time we get to the end of the year. Here are your transfers, $4.5 million. Almost all of that is for capital improvements that council approved. And we've got your general fund balance composition. Started the year at just under 25 million. Total net change for the year is about 5.7 million reduction. Most of that, again, is that transfer out for capital. That leaves us 19 million. Take away your designated fund balances and your reserves, and you end up with 4.5 million ending fund balance. The other item on here I want to mention out is that Stadium District Fund. We've reduced that because of the Bellevue train. It's now been delivered and operating as of last weekend. The rest of the funds are sales tax slides. I won't go through them individually, but I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Director. Any questions for Mr. Engels from council? Go ahead, Member Wright.
I do. Excuse me, I do. Good evening, and thank you for being here. Let me get to my page, please. I read in here that there was, from the ARPA funds, money that was put to help the homeless. I want to say it was more than $100,000, I believe, recently. Can you tell me what groups received that money?
So that is for our coordinator. That is through Arapahoe County.
The Tri-Cities?
That's right. It used to be Tri-Cities. Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then the other question I had, under the general fund expenditures, and please bear with me, I'm still learning this, so
Absolutely.
I may have this completely wrong. Finance was...
Not a problem.
I know how to pay the bills and keep a good credit score, so when it comes to this, like information technology, fire, emergency management, and debt services, they are at more than 40% of their budget, and this is for April. Could their budgets be in trouble if they're that high to their budget so far?
So let me go through those for you. So information technologies, a lot of their spending is loaded up in the front of the year. Like maintenance contracts, they pay for the full year, but it's early in the year. So that 40% should reduce down as we go through the year. A few more months and that should look better.
Okay,
Fire and emergency management, we pay that contract 1 month in advance, and it's about $500,000. So that's why that one's that way.
okay,
And debt service, that's only paid every 6 months. So there won't be another chunk like that 74. If you'll notice, it's about the same as last year. And the largest part of that is a principal payment, and we only pay that once a year, and that's already been paid for the year.
okay, perfect, that's what I needed. Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions from council? Seeing none, Director, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have our Sustainability Coordinator, Melissa Englund, and members of the Sustainability Commission here to provide code update recommendations regarding the use of the Western native plants. Good evening.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, City Council members. I'm here tonight to introduce the Sustainability Commission's Chair, Michael Chisholm, as well as a topic that they want to bring in front of City Council around updating the code to make it more clear about the permissible use of Colorado native plants. And I'll just say that this topic was brought up by a non-commission member during one of the public comment sections of a commission meeting. It was then further discussed by commission members and then unanimously voted on to bring in front of council at their April meeting. Mike's going to go through all the specifics of what they're recommending, but I just want to say that this aligns really well with the city's sustainability goals, and it also aligns really well with the increased demand and interest we're seeing from residents around native plants. And then before I hand it over to Mike, I just want to flag there is one tiny error. It has recommendations for section 16-6-7, landscaping and screening. This is actually after Code Next, that's chapter 8, landscape design. So 16.6.7 is chapter 8. I hope that's the only one that I need to flag. But I will now hand it over to Mike. They're in here somewhere.
Oh, there's a lot of budget slides. Keep going.
Okay, so it's not just me.
There we are.
Perfect.
You gonna click it for me?
Oh gosh, I don't have good luck with that.
Thanks.
You're on your own, Michael.
There you go. I think the recommendations are pretty clear. We just feel that the city code should reflect the fact that many of us in Englewood are encouraging the use of native plants and Colorado scaping, and that's good. The city's embracing it. That's all good. There have been some instances where code enforcement has bumped into some homeowners, not a lot, but it just seems to us that the code should reflect the fact that Englewood is behind native landscaping. And code enforcement has been doing a great job. Nothing's on fire, nobody's upset, but it's just preventive maintenance, and we think it's accurate to reflect it in the code.
Anything else, Michael?
No, sir?
All right. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions for members of council? So no, it does make sense. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael, did you want to add something?
Again, just some rationale for why we're recommending the changes. And sort of the common sense reasoning for doing
Right.
it.
Thank you, Michael. So yeah, we just want to be a little bit more clear on our definition of what's considered a weed versus what is considered a native plant.
Right.
Correct.
And those people who are interested in doing Colorado scaping, they know the names of the plants. It wouldn't be hard for them to communicate to code enforcement that this is not a weed. And as code enforcement tunes into the code, they'll become more familiar with what's a weed and what's a Colorado scaping plant. And I think it'll flow. I don't think there's going to be any major headaches in this area. I hope not.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michael. Member Wright.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. I had a question, because in here you talk about heights of 12 inches. I had a neighbor last year that had planted sunflowers.
Okay.
They received a citation from code enforcement because the sunflowers, and she put them all in the front of her yard because she wanted to put up a sunflower fence, I guess,
Right.
to protect her grandchildren when she put a temporary pool in the yard. She didn't want, we live on a thorough street. She wanted to block people from seeing her granddaughters playing in that pool. So until those sunflowers fully came up, it looked like a weed. She got a citation, had to prove it wasn't a weed. While we're updating this, possibly, my thought is, I know that Englewood is rather strict on their grass heights and stuff like that. It's a 6-inch. If we're updating codes for native plants and stuff like that, would it be smart to possibly update a 12-inch height or a 10-inch height on other things, like grasses and stuff like that? And change the coding completely, I guess, to the grasses so that we have a comprehensive code. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
Actually, Member Wright, do you mind if I just pass that question to City Attorney Niles? Because I think that would fall under the CEAC if they wanted to make the change on that, but any
And
guidance?
possibly, and maybe this is just opening the door to do that, I guess is what it is.
City Attorney Niles, did you want to weigh in on that process for adding potentially other items such as grasses that are over 12 inch or?
Yeah, you know, maybe code enforcement looking into it. Maybe I'm just thinking because I've seen you at code enforcement. But if we have native grasses also that people are, planting more often and that type of thing, so.
Just some background on CEAC. It is an advisory board to City Council on code enforcement related issues. That's paraphrasing, their actual duties are listed in municipal code. It wouldn't be unusual for boards to work together in jointly creating a recommendation for City Council based on their scope of authority. So we do a background where Sustainability Commission and CEAC could work together and consider those issues.
And I guess, maybe that's something we could ask them to look at, because I think currently it's 6 inches. And code enforcement might welcome the change, but I do like what you have here, and I like the 12-inch height. It does give things like sunflowers a chance to prove what they are. So.
And sunflowers stand alone. I mean, there's more sunflowers in Englewood this year than last year, and I've got neighbors that really get into it. And code enforcement has been tolerating and working with them. So that's an interesting example because that's not necessarily a native plant that we're talking about.
But they're popular.
But we're talking about a finite number of plants here. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we could talk about sunflowers and we could talk about native grasses. So, it's not a universe of plants that we're describing. Right? So,
Thank you.
Member Russell.
So my question is, will this come back to council before, or is this the recommendations for us to actually put this in an ordinance form?
I don't know.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, City Attorney Niles, but if there's no changes or there's no modifications that council would like to make, then it would come in front of us as an ordinance, correct?
Generally, we would expect direction during council members' choice as to whether we should draft an ordinance and bring it back and work with Sustainability Commission to do so. But it would depend on your discussion here on the study session to see if it's something you would like to pursue.
Thank you. And actually, I think that Councilmember Wright has a good suggestion, because I think if we are going to make these changes, and these changes actually make sense, but I'm wondering if there are some other changes along the same lines, because Code Enforcement Advisory Committee can talk about weeds. And so we're talking about changing the definition of a weed. And I know it's come up in CEAC also, but I'm really wondering if the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee should look at making this more extensive than just changing this one definition. I think we could talk about that.
Yeah,
So,
thank you, Member Russell.
thank you.
Member Ward.
I just have one question regarding your recommendation, specifically the part of the recommendation that says limit or eliminate, I think it is, the installation of turf grass. Limit or restrict the use of turf grass. What is the purpose of that? I understand the purpose of enabling people to have native plants, but I don't understand the purpose of telling your neighbor that they can't have turf grass.
If I understand your question, Steve, like, what kind of grasses are we talking about? What are the differentiations? Is that what you're asking?
So the purpose of this project would be to enable people to have more native plants, which sometimes are not allowed or not well understood by the current city code. But there's a second fork here in the recommendations. If you look at the recommendations that came from the committee, it says changing section 16-6-7 landscaping and screening to promote the use of native plants and limit or restrict the use of turf grass.
Okay.
And my concern with that recommendation is that it changes the things that people are allowed to do in our city and restricts behavior which is otherwise allowed under the current code. If what we're looking to do is to open up the code to allow people to have other options, that's what we should be doing. If we're looking to discourage people from installing turf grass, sure, we can do that in the code, but it's not something that I would support. So I'm just wondering what the basis of that portion of the committee's recommendation is.
Well, I would say the bias of those who put this together is that turf grass uses a lot of water and it's not native and it doesn't make sense in Colorado. Those words might be too harsh. We might say, rather than restrict the use of turf grass, we discourage it. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Rather than limit or restrict, we might say we discourage or dissuade people. But I mean, the fact of the matter is Kentucky bluegrass is not the best grass to be growing in Englewood, Colorado. But I don't want the grass police to go out and attack people that are growing turf grass. So we're talking about living in an environment now where native grasses make more sense than non-native. But I don't think there's any intention here to punish or dissuade people from having a chunk of beautiful Kentucky bluegrass in their front yard. That's okay too. But I get your point, Steve. I mean, it does sound kind of harsh. I guess it doesn't need to be that harsh.
Member Nunnenkamp.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Chisholm, thank you for being here this evening. I had a similar question to Member Ward, but if I read the recommendations on the slide with the yellow highlights, if this is the only language, maybe the intent of the commission is to reduce the use of turf grass, but I don't think that's actually in the recommended language. So let me know if I'm wrong on that. And then my second question is, would this only apply to yards? I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with these sections of the code. Or would this also apply to alleys? Because weeds growing over 12 inches is a problem we have traditionally in our alleys quite a bit. Would this allow folks to also grow native grasses in the alley? And are we comfortable with that? So can you speak to that, or maybe can staff?
Great question. I think alleys are a relevant point to bring up. If I'm responsible for cutting the weeds in my alley, I would think if I chose to put native grasses in there according to code, that should be legal. So I would say my interpretation is this applies to my property. As a homeowner in Englewood, I have a responsibility, and do I have the opportunity to use native grasses? So my answer would be the alley would be the same as my front yard.
That's helpful clarification. I think I'd want staff just to look into that because obviously we want the alleys to be cleared for traffic and want them to be safe as well. And so I would want to understand how far into the alley the property line is where someone could potentially plant new vegetation and if that would become an issue just for the clearance of the roadway. So I'd want to learn more from our staff on the feasibility of that.
And I don't think the alley is a deal breaker. I think the thinking was the front yard, you know, what's visible from the street. So I don't know of many instances other than where the weeds are so high in the alley that code enforcement has to intervene. I don't think it would be reasonable to scatter a few native grasses in there as your defense mechanism. So your point's well taken. Alleys, there's safety and other issues involved. So that was not a burning issue for us.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chisholm, and for the presentation. Appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that restricting Kentucky bluegrass is not one of the recommendations, but I did want to just speak to the glories and wonders for a moment of Kentucky bluegrass in certain use situations. For example, I have a 6-acre lot with 6 children, and there is absolutely no other grass out there that will hold up to the kind of traffic that we put on that grass. And it costs us a lot to water it and fertilize it and keep it alive. But without it, my yard would be totally useless to my children. And I want people to have freedom to do whatever they want with their yards. Most people don't need to utilize their yard as heavily with foot traffic as we do because there's fewer people and they're just sitting on the porch, not running around in circles. But we have a lot of circle runners, and I hope that restricting Kentucky bluegrass never becomes something that we want to do in the city of Englewood.
Yeah.
Member Wright.
Thank you. When I was reading this where it says restrict the use of turf grass, I was thinking of the artificial turf type of grass. So I think that when this comes around, we need to look at, I wasn't thinking of the Kentucky bluegrass and that those type of grasses where it does take more work, more water, that. So my suggestion would be where we outline that a little bit more. We have, you know, all kinds of, in my little neighborhood, we do have the Kentucky bluegrass. I thought the artificial turf, because I have a neighbor that has artificial turf, and that's why my brain went to that, I believe. So, you know, I think that's what makes this council so unique, is because we do think differently. So if, you know, someone out there was reading this, they would think, you know, Kentucky bluegrass or artificial turf. So if we could just outline that a little bit more, I think everyone would appreciate that a little bit, please.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
our intent is not to attack turf grass. So if it's maintained and people are happy with their yards, that's wonderful. This is more the other side of the equation of, can we make it more possible and easier to use native grasses? That's our intent.
Any other questions for members of council? I know that we were going to be looking to provide direction at some point. Based off the recommendations of the Sustainability Commission, I'd be perfectly happy seeing this move forward as is. You know, I would be happy to have CEAC look into this as well, but I don't want to hold up this ordinance, would be my preference. I would like them to start doing the work on that piece, because I know it could take several months for this to happen or move forward, but this seems very concrete, very simple, and it's something that we're trying to promote as it is. So I'd be happy to see this move forward as an ordinance. Not sure how other members of council feel or if they want to weigh in. Go ahead, Member Noonkemp.
I'm happy to see this move forward as well, just with the caveat that I mentioned about the alleys. I'd just like to be clear, because I can see a scenario where if someone was growing maybe a really tall native grass and it, was exceeded 12 inches, but then became a hazard to the roadway. I want clarity on if we need to maybe specify that this would only apply to lots and not to alleys or something, or yards and not alleys. But with that piece, I'd like to see it move forward.
Thank you. Ms. England, are you able to take that piece back or work with the city attorney just to make sure that there's no additional language that we need to specify regarding the alley for this piece? So, thank you. Member Russell.
Thank you. And if we're moving forward with this, I'm okay with the language, but I would like to remove the word restrict the use of turf grass. Even, just remove the whole phrase.
Thank you, Member Russell. I'm trying to think if that's actually in the language of the code. I know it's just part of the bullet, but I don't think that's actually going to make it within code. But I see your point. If there is restrictions within the code language, then it does sound like members of council wants a strike through on that. So, but we'll make a note of that. Anyone with a different opinion? If not, Michael, thank you. Thank you very much for the work of the Sustainability Commission. We'll get this on the agenda at a future meeting. And thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully you're sticking around for the next topic.
Okay.
Well, the next topic coming up is Director Underhill, here to talk about the Parks and Rec Go Bond.
And Mayor, if I could.
Oh, sorry about that. City Manager Lewis, go ahead.
No worries. Just wanted to just reiterate the need for tonight. I'm going to step back from this mic a little. The real outcome that we want to get from tonight is to whether or not to put the bond question on the November ballot. And if so, what dollar amount would council be comfortable asking the voters to approve? And so, as you know, we started this process a little over 2 years ago with some public outreach and conversations. Unfortunately, could not put it on last year's ballot because of some restrictions in our code about what gets put on the ballot. But I want to thank the Parks and Recreation and Library Golf Department for their hard work in putting tonight's presentation together. Christina.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Christina Underhill, Director of Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf. With me tonight, I've got Deputy Director Brad Anderson, as well as Open Space Manager Adrian Torres, Director Engels, as well as Director Michelle are also here if there are questions for them as we go through this. Just to remind you all, the current recreation bond actually ended last year. For the new 2024 bond proposal, right now it sits at $50 million, includes 10 parks, the Inglewood Recreation Center, and Pirates Cove. Today, we're doing the study session to determine if council would like to move forward with the bond in November, and if so, what that dollar amount will be. And I also provided all of you a handout that has the dates for the upcoming elections, so you can see what has to happen after the first and second reading. Right now, the first reading, if you decide to move this forward, would be June 17th, and then the following second reading would be July 22nd. Again, this is a layout of where the projects would occur. The red square are all the bond projects. The blue circle is projects that have been completed in the last 4 years. So every area of our city, every district would be impacted with the bond. This is an outline of the bond timeline. We started back in August 11th of 2022, doing some renovations and drawings for Little Dry Creek Plaza. These are all the commission meetings as well as the city council meetings we've been a part of and presented the bond information for, as well as a special event outreach that we've done since the summer of 2023. Again, some of the benefits and themes that we look at for this bond were sustainability, improving our neighborhoods, improving efficiency in our parks, ADA improvements, revenue generation, activation of areas that we don't see activation happening currently, as well as attracting teens and teen programs. Right now, this is a list of the parks that would be impacted by the bond and the proposed dollar amount. That's a full dollar amount for each of those parks. Bellevue and Miller are the two big parks. They're more community-based parks that could use some big upgrades too, and that's the dollar amount for those. The other parks are more of our neighborhood parks. And neighborhood parks are accessible throughout the neighborhood, walking distance typically, and many times they're not destination parks for larger areas of the community or other residents to visit. These are the two recreation facility projects, just totaling under $20 million. The Recreation Center and the improvements that are proposed there, from the aquatics area to the north side of the Recreation Center, that's just really a parking lot and old sand volleyball courts, and renovating that to become a pavilion, as well as some pickleball courts, as well as landscape improvements. Pirates Cove is just under 10 million, just at 9, and with that, we'd be removing the large competitive pool, putting in some new slides, and adding a 4-lane mat racer along with some more larger pavilions that could be rented throughout the summer season. So this is the budget overview of the bonds. Again, it's just around $50 million for all these projects. There's a lot of factors that go into these projects, and I'll cover those here shortly. So staff and myself went through the next 20 years of need in our parks. The items on here that are bold are parks that have been, or facilities that have been called out as part of the bonds. The ones that are not in bold are items that we have not addressed as part of the bond, and those would move more into a grant situation that we would renovate over time if we were successful with the bonds. Today's dollars, it's about $77 million worth of need over the next 20 years. That's today's money. We would anticipate, and a good example of this is Pirates Cove was built in 2002 for around $9 million, and we're asking for $9 million to renovate a few elements of that park. I was doing some research for other communities that have installed aquatic centers or areas like Pirates Cove. Recently, there was one that was built for $29 million, and you could compare it, probably not as nice as Pirates Cove, but similar elements. So today's money is definitely doesn't go as far as years past. If we were successful with the bonds, or if we were not successful, this is the grant layout. This is something Adrian Torres, our open space manager, looks at very carefully. He has been very successful with Arapahoe County open space grants. And this would be the projected layout. Granted, needs may change over the years. Other parks might rise up the list based off a need. But ultimately, we have $19.7 million that we could go after in the next 20 years. That'd be $11 million in grants and $8 million in city matching funds. In talking with our deputy city manager and city manager, we talked about how do we drop the number down from 50 million? And what do we look at as far as themes or reasons to put some projects forward or not? So first of all, we'd be looking at access and safety, ADA. Throughout all our parks and our facilities. That'd be the first item we would be addressing. Next, we're going to look at sustainability, whether that be irrigation, turf modification. Revenue is another one. Obviously, we want to continue generating funds for the general fund through Pirates Cove, the Recreation Center, Farm and Train, and pavilion rentals, as well as activating space. Miller Field is an excellent example of how we could potentially activate an area that's less used currently. We did the stop matrix for you to show, starting at 35 million, what projects could happen at that dollar amount, and then it progresses up to 50 million. I do want to make a note that the 45 and 50 million, all projects are checked on that. And that's something that for 45 million, we can get all these projects done as presented. However, when we go out for design, there might be areas we cut back a little bit on. Maybe it's less trees in the park, maybe the rec center and the locker rooms, we don't go with the gold standard, but something very close to cut back costs in order to complete all of these. We do believe all of these are necessary and important projects to implement in our community. This shows you the neighborhood park breakdown as well. Depending on how you view things, we also broke it down in a layout that shows you what projects are included as you move through the list, all the way from 35 to 50 million. And we did include that dot matrix as a handout for you as well. Like I mentioned, Director Engels is here tonight if there's questions on mill levies, but we did have this run late last week. We got the results back, and this lays out where we fall within other communities in our area that are similar. And we're at 8.062 mils currently for general operating funds in cities. It's not the lowest. Littleton and Greenwood Village are also on there, but I do want to point out there's 3 of these cities that are paying an ongoing 8.3 mil to South Suburban for improvements and access to their parks and recreation facilities. And this is what it's going to cost our residents. This has changed slightly since past presentations. We met with the bond council about a week and a half ago to discuss what options are out there. Currently, we sit at a 6% interest rate today. They do estimate possibly when we go for the bonds to sell, the interest rate may drop between 5 and 6, maybe lower, but this is at the high end. So worst case, 6% is the interest rate. At $35 million for a $500,000 home, it's $116, and it goes on to a $50 million bond, which would be $166. In parentheses is the monthly cost to our residents. And again, we had the bond that was $13.6 million, sunsetted in 2023, and our residents for a $500,000 home are paying $84 annually for that bond. And then just to remind you all the ballot language, we can only have one ballot question on the November ballot. So first reading is proposed for June 17th, second, July 22nd. The last day to submit the IGA to the county is August 27th, and then to certify the ballot is September 6th. And by September 20th at noon is the last day to accept pro-con statements from you all, the community, anyone who submits. I do have other slides in here that go over all the projects that we have, and I'm happy to answer specific questions about those. But ultimately, as City Manager Lewis mentioned, tonight we need to know if you're interested in moving forward with this bond, and if so, what dollar amount. One thing I'd like to share, we've had a lot of questions and comments coming in through social media, email, and so forth. We have concept drawings, and that's what you can see in these following slides. These are just concepts of what could be. I know there's concerns about native grass areas in these. We definitely don't want to take away large turf areas. We don't go to construction drawings until we know we have the money because they're quite expensive to do. We did learn on Friday that Bellevue Park is actually in the FEMA floodplain, and that changes the concept drawing for Bellevue Park. The farm area will have to move out of the floodplain. There's a few proposals. Again, we just found this out, and so our consultants will be looking at doing those studies and ensuring that if we are able to renovate and move the farm, we'll put it in a position where it'll be out of the FEMA floodway, which is actually the upper parking lot where the farm is located. We can move it to that and redo some of the parking options in the park. But again, this is why we don't go into construction drawings until we have the money secured. Because there's a lot of things that can move around, a lot of studies that may have to happen in order to get us to construction ready and implement these programs. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have, but again, we need discussion tonight regarding if you want to move forward and the dollar amount.
Thank you so much, Director. Member Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question deals with the 45 versus 50 million. You made some reference to this. As I look at this, there's only one dot that is not marked on the 45 that is marked on the 50, and that's pedestrian lighting at Bellevue Park. It's difficult for me to imagine that pedestrian lighting at Bellevue Park actually costs $5 million. How are we deriving that?
That's a great question. I apologize. I missed that dot. I did miss one. Yeah.
So it should be marked.
It should be marked. Yeah, I do apologize for that. That was my miss.
Okay.
That is an important one. We know we did solar lighting recently at Bellevue Park, and it has been successful in that.
My second question is that there are a number of items on the 35 or $40 million list that I would support, and likewise a number of items on those lists that I would not support. Are we, I know the answer to this question, but I'd like to hear it anyway. Are we restricted to the menu presented to us, or could we as a body potentially say, these are the items that we want, or do some sort of work to find a place where there was a list of projects that we could all support for a price that we could all support?
You're 100% correct. You can go through this list and mix and match however you want. This is just our proposal with the dollar amounts, knowing what everything costs, what we'd like to see. But if there's projects you want to see move forward and others that you don't, we can also go down that road too.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Member Wright.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How long has the farm been in The spot it's been in?
This bond?
The farm.
Oh, the farm. Over 20 years at least.
And we're just now finding out it's in a FEMA floodplain? Yeah, it's just, it's one of those moments, so. It's, and how often do they do a
update.
updated? Every 20 years?
Director Rochelle might know that answer.
Actually, remember, right, do you just mind going to, since that's more of a floodplain question, not really go on,
It
but, yeah.
makes that we have to move an entire building and redo parking over something that we probably should have known years ago is.
And it's possible the
It's a
city knew about this.
costly thing that
Yeah.
I think we should know about.
And I'll add too, Emerson Park's also on this. Many of our parks are in floodplains. We know that, but to what degree? So like Emerson Park is not a FEMA floodway. It's a Mile High District floodway. And so there's potential that that park could very well flood, and homes in that area are outlines that may also flood in an extreme event. And so ultimately, like for Bellevue, looking at that, yes, Martin, just recently that was updated. When you go to do any renovation or any construction, these are the studies that have to happen in order to even move forward. So like, that's why we only do conceptual drawings, because we need to know basic dollar amounts. And as we move forward, the studies will occur.
And that makes sense because you have the creek that goes through there,
Right.
which would be an overflow. It just makes sense to me. And you are correct, and I'll move on because it just, I don't know. You are correct. We've received a lot of emails and phone calls and stuff about concerns on losing play areas for children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews. Some of the comments I've heard is, you know, it will take 5 years for native grass to grow, but research has told these people that I've received calls from that, no, you'll never be able to play, those type of things. So those are big concerns that I've heard from people. They don't want to lose the ability to go to their parks and play, you know, kick the ball with their kids. We've received an email that they want a community swimming pool other than Pirates Cove. They want a neighborhood pool. So people are starting to ask big asks if we're going to have a bond. We received a list of really good questions from a citizen, and I was milling through these questions. I'm like, yeah, some of these are kind of good questions, and one of them I will touch base on is the at Centennial Park, which is the closest park to me, the bike, what do we call it?
The bike park.
The bike park. Yeah,
Yes.
I guess that's what we call it. And one of the questions was, what about people that live in districts 1, 2, and 3? How are the kids going to access it?
That's a great question. We actually had our GIS team map from districts 1, 2, and 3 how you can get to Centennial Bike Park. I would not recommend kids doing this on their own without parents if they're younger. We are installing a bike playground that's geared towards younger kids at Bates Logan if we're successful with the grant this year. We also have in the proposal over at Clarkson Amherst a little pump track as well, and those are both in districts 1, 2 area. So there's going to be these types of elements spread out through our community, but there is access through the Mary Carter Greenway Trail to get all the way to Centennial Park from Lake Dartmouth. And so that we can put that on our bond page so people can see that map on how you can access different areas of the city through trails, whether it be on-street bike lanes or actual trails throughout our system.
Most people would have to cross Dartmouth Santa Fe.
Yep.
To get to it, and I think that's part of the concern.
Do you remember Dartmouth goes under Santa Fe through the trail system? So it's not major street crossings for the most part. There might be a couple, but it's fairly safe.
So older kids and
right,
would have to go through there. So
if you wouldn't mind me chiming in there, remember right, the Big Dry Creek also goes underneath. There's a tunnel that takes you through to the other side, so.
And you're an avid biker, aren't you? So
I
you
am,
know
yeah.
these things.
I'll show you the way, so.
Perfect. Would get me a big tricycle. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Wright. Member Russell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I just have a couple of questions. At the last council meeting, we had a citizen present about the native grasses to put in those parks. I mean, even like Emerson and Clarkson Park, I think, were the two of them. And I actually agree with him. And it kind of goes along to what the Mayor Pro Tem shared a little earlier about having 6 children and, you know, they want to play on turf. And the truth is, that's what our parks are doing. And we have increased density. Even this council has made some plans that will increase density substantially. We need to make sure that we have play areas for them and not take anything of that away. I mean, I know it costs money to water turf grass, but are you reconsidering any of that, or will you reconsider that?
That's a great question. I think it's all on the table, and that's why we say these are concepts, because even at the Emerson Park Neighborhood Nights, we heard from all those residents that came to that live right around that neighborhood. Some loved the plan that we had in place, and others said, I don't want a playground. I don't want people outside of this neighborhood to necessarily come to this park because you put a brand new playground in. The purpose of the native areas was supposed to be educational for our community, since like just what was presented about sustainability of encouraging people to move to native to cut back on water. I don't disagree that eliminating some of it would make sense in some of these parks. Rotolo might be a great example of that, but we want to keep it on the table for discussion. There might be neighborhood parks we can do some of these turf conversions to native in. It might not be as much as we've proposed, but that's an ongoing project and something that we're looking at. Again, it's not in stone. What we see on the concepts could very greatly change. We'd stay within whatever the budget's been given to us, but ultimately those concepts could change.
So the problem is, this is the problem that I have. I want to know what the solid plan is before I'm willing to vote yes on $50 million. And if I vote yes on $50 million and all of those things I was counting on go out the window, there's going to be a lot of upset people in the city, and that's why it is very important to make these decisions before the ballot is actually printed.
And that's feedback I'd love from council. If native's off the table and nobody here supports it, we need to know that. That way, moving forward, when we update those concepts, that piece is taken out.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one other question, and you brought this up about the city of Englewood can only have one ballot question on November. Is that just a GO bond question, or is that any question?
I'm actually going to refer to Attorney Niles on that one.
Yes, thank you. Our charter sections 14 and 104 require that only GEO-bond can be the only question on the ballot, and Tabor requires it to be in an even year. So if we do have a GEO-bond question, it can only be in November of even numbered years. And we can put nothing else on the ballot with it.
Can the citizens put something on the ballot?
If there is something else on the ballot, we can't have a GEO question on it for a citywide election.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Underhill. I wanted to speak to the turf grass because I think for me, I'm similar to Councilmember Russell on this. I would like to see it drastically cut down in a way that we knew that it was that's what we were going to get. We knew what we were going to get, or it's not too like a new set of rough drawings that it's not going to exceed this or something like that. I mean, I'm not familiar with some of the parks, not familiar with some of them or how they're used. I just saw the drawing of Rotolo and I thought, oh, that's the sledding hill that my kids use, and so I don't want, certainly I can speak to that one for sure, that I don't want that area to be turf grass, but I think a lot of people would have similar feelings about different parks in their neighborhood. I had kind of imagined the turf grass being, in kind of ornamental displays around the edges or the signs or that kind of thing. That's what I would be, I'd be most, I don't know if I'm going to, where I'm going to fall in terms of actually voting for this altogether yet. But if the thing that would get me closest is just a much more limited turf grass, and knowing for sure that when I vote, that's what it's going to be in that ballpark there. My follow-up on your presentation was regarding the improvements at Pirates Cove and the rec center. I think those were the improvements that were least supported in the surveys that we did, and they also benefit, to me, benefit the least number of citizens. You talk a bit about these are revenue generating locations. My question is, if we're borrowing a massive amount of money to do these improvements, is that offset by the revenue that we're potentially going to generate, or where do we end up falling on the revenue if you take into consideration the fact that we're paying millions of dollars over the course of 20 years?
Revenue is definitely a consideration we all have to think about in this, knowing we could generate revenue for the general funds. It won't pay back the amount we spend on Pirates Cove for probably quite a few years. It'll take some time to do that, but ultimately we know we have needs. And the facility is over 20 years old. The rec center's turning 40 next year. The question is, if we need to do major renovations, where does that money come from in order to do so? And ultimately, I don't think the city, an unreserved fund balance or unassigned fund balance has enough funds in it to address some of these needs over time. And so a harder decision may have to be made in future years about Pirates Cove and the Recreation Center to keep them relevant and in working condition. And so that's why we put them on the bond for this year, is to address those as early as possible and stay ahead of it.
Is Pirates Cove a what's the fund name?
Enterprise?
Enterprise.
It is not.
It is not an enterprise fund?
No.
But do you see it producing more revenue than it's costing when you account for the money we have to borrow to keep it maintained?
Sure, I'll let Deputy Director Brad Anderson answer that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know if there's other questions that can come back to me.
Sounds good. We got about
Follow up.
7 minutes before the top of the hour. We're going to try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. I know we may go over a little bit, though. So just 3 questions for me, Director. Can I get clarity on the native plants question in terms of when you do plant native plants, like how long do they have to stay before there could be any type of foot traffic in the area? That was one question that came up. And then the other 2 questions are, just worst case, what if this doesn't pass? Like, what's the impact to Parks and Recs if we're not able to get the GO bond to pass? And then also, Member Russell kind of alluded to it. There's been some ask from the public in terms of what they would like to see. Obviously, one of them was scaling back native plants. Others are bringing the swimming pool, things like that. What is the project plan if something does pass? Like, are we doing this over like 5 years? What's the community engagement while we develop the project plan? What does that look like?
Sure, I'll start backwards. So project timeline, we have 3 years to spend 85% of whatever dollar amount the bond is.
Well, how many years?
3 years
Okay.
total. So in 3 years, you'll see the money's already at play. And then as far as, do you want to talk about native plants, Adrian? And then to the second question, the dollar amount, and that slide was in there, 77 millions that we've identified of today's dollars. So if this bond doesn't pass, the city will be looking for grants. We'll probably be putting projects before you regarding the unassigned fund balance. We've done that in 2022. We renovated 3 parks using that. And so ultimately, we know the dollar amount's going to continue to grow year after year, just knowing how inflation works and how dollars go, so.
Thank you, Director. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So my kind of trying to work through the math on this. Am I understanding correctly that if we did the $35 million general obligation bond, that would be $116.80 a month in cost to the citizens? Is that right?
For the $35 million
Yeah,
one?
that's a monthly,
Yeah, hold on.
yearly. Okay.
Year total, yeah.
Can you go back
All
to
right,
the
you
slide?
mentioned- Yeah, I thought I heard monthly earlier.
So 35 million would get us at 116.80 per year, so that's $9.73 per month.
Got it. All right, $973 a month. Okay. Here's my concern about the Pirates Cove is if under all these plans, it sounds like the plan is to remove the swimming pool. Is that
The
correct?
large competition pool is 20 years old. We have some major issues with it leaking right now. We know that's only going to increase year after
Right.
year.
So we got to remove it, but what we're getting for that, from a citizen perspective, is an increase in taxes and something that you then have to pay to access. And once you pay to access it, you don't have a pool anymore. And that's the only outdoor, public outdoor pool in Inglewood. We like to go there for the pool. I really do like the idea of having a public pool in Inglewood. I know we've heard this from citizens as well, and that's just a really hard sell for me, is to say we're going to take away the one pool that we have, and then you still have to pay all this money to go in. And if you just wanted to use a pool, well, that's no longer an option. You have to pay all this money to go use slides. So I don't know. I'm not feeling great about the Pirates Cove aspect of it personally.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further questions or any type of, we should give direction because this will be coming in front of us on the 17th. I think there's members of the public tonight that are going to be weighing into public comment as well. I guess I will start off. I have had a chance to speak to citizens. Obviously, I am in favor of having something as part of the a certain number come up. What I find hard is that I do have a personal opinion about some of the things that I don't want to see and other things that I do want to see, but I've also heard from members of the public that they do want to see that. So for me, it's very difficult where I do have a personal preference. Like one of them is just, to me, the pocket parks should stay kind of just how they are. But I've heard from citizens, no, there should be some type of, whether benches or something to do where you're in the park, those pocket parks. They want to see that. So who am I to say that we shouldn't be doing that aspect of it within the pocket parks? But just overall for the plan itself, it's very hard for me to just start nitpicking all the little aspects that I do want to see or don't want to see. So for me, I do have concerns about the high-end number in terms of 50 million, but I would be satisfied at 40 or 45 million. I would like to see that come forward. I do want to see continued community engagement in terms of what it is that we want to see for each individual park and just have that very localized. As part of this, as obviously we move forward and maybe if the GO bond does pass. So I'll be comfortable in the 40 or $45 million range. And then obviously just continue to have community engagement on the topic. So anyone else want to weigh in? Member Noonekamp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in a similar position. I would be comfortable with somewhere in the mid-range. Excuse me. We obviously want to put the city in the strongest position possible, and we want to give the residents the opportunity to tell us what they're interested in. And I have some hesitancy around some of the things that are currently in this plan that feel a little bit like a trend to me. It just feels like a lot of money for something like a surf simulator that I'm not confident will be highly used. And so I would like us to really invest in kind of tried and true classic parks amenities that we know people are really interested in and that won't go kind of out of fashion quite quickly. Just thinking about how to set us up for success. So that would be my preference. And for us to be really thoughtful in those approaches, get us somewhere in the mid-range, and ensure that we have a chance of securing long-term success. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Member Noonekamp. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, just for the sake of providing a little direction, I think if if I am to support this, it's going to be with some changes and on the low end. You know, like especially changes regarding Pirates Cove and I think the surf simulator is another good example of something I would be happy to see removed as well, and keep the bond down to the 35 million range.
So preference is 35 million, okay. Anyone else want to weigh in? I guess I'll just ask City Attorney Niles, if we kind of keep, it doesn't sound like we're going to come to an agreement in terms of what the dollar number may be for the GO bond. Is that something that we could just go ahead and amend as part of the meeting on the 17th?
Yes, we don't plan to bring, well, is it set for first reading on the 17th?
We're shooting for the 17th.
Yes, so you can amend it at that time. It would have to be first and second reading in exact same form.
Right.
So if you amend the proposed draft, it would just have to be the amended version that's approved on second reading. If for some reason you should change your mind or can't come to agreement on the 17th, we could designate a special meeting the next Monday for first reading as well. We've built in an extra week to give you that option.
Okay. Thank you, City Attorney Niles. I think it'd be very difficult, especially with the hour that we're at right now, just right at 7 o'clock. I'd like to get the meeting started, but it does sound like we, at the very least, we do want to see something on the 17th. We'll make a decision at that point after public comment tonight and actually, and obviously getting feedback from the public over the next couple of weeks. But I see no further questions or comments. Director, staff, thank you very much for your time. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And with that, do we need a short break before we kick off the meeting? Let's take a 5-minute meeting, come back at a little bit after like 7:06, and we'll kick off the meeting at that point. Thank you, everyone. All right, everyone. We are now back. There we go. Hold on. All right, I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. City Clerk, if you could please take a roll call.
Yes, good evening. Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Present?
Member Noonenkamp,
Present?
Member Prang, Member Russell,
Present.
Member Ward,
Present.
Member Wright,
Present.
Mayor Sierra.
Present.
Six members present.
Thank you. And Member Prang did let me know that she was not going to be present tonight. Up next is the consideration of the minutes from the previous meeting. Any changes to the minutes from the meeting on May 20th? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from May 20th?
Move to approve the minutes from May 20th.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Wright. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Member Wright,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on now to recognition. And is Ms. Fenton here tonight? If not, City Council would like to recognize all the students that attended the spring session of the Citizen Planning School. We appreciate your dedication to the city and your enthusiasm in learning about local planning. We hope the knowledge you gain will be an asset for years to come, and we congratulate you on completing the session. We're going to call out each of your names tonight, so if you're able, if you're here in attendance, if you would just come up, take a picture. We'll actually ask you to stand off to the side after you take a picture so we can take a group picture towards the end. So, City Manager, will you be taking the picture? And I think we have our, there we go, our Deputy City Clerk also handing out. So, City Clerk, do you want to read off the names once I get up there?
All right. Ashley Mock, Whitney Galloway, Kelly Rowan, Suri Tofignia, Logan Dunning, Andrea Mannion, Victoria Smith, Kenneth Olmsted, Justin Giesler, Beverly Coleman, Rick Emmelhines, Dave Renson, David Renson. Melissa Adams, Andrew Forlines, Linda Curry, Veronica Hine, Rhonda Wilcox, Stephen Paul, Carl Sanford, Craig Hine, and Sophie King.
Mr. Isom, I neglected to have you say a few words, if you wouldn't mind, so, to finish up.
Sure. So Citizens Planning School is an interactive program that's sponsored by the city's Community Development Department. It provides our residents and business owners with a background in the fundamentals of city planning. So this year, we had a 5-week course that consisted of reviews of the development process in the city, a tour of new and ongoing development in Inglewood, an in-depth look at our comprehensive plan and examples of zoning and land use interpretations using the revised Title 16, an interactive city building project, and a panel discussion with staff and current and ex-members of our boards and commissions. This year, with our students, we're working to extend Citizen Planning School into a fall semester, sort of a Citizen Planning 2.0. With surveys from our group this year, we're trying to craft a more in-depth look at city planning within Inglewood. And we do want to thank all of our students. This is one of our favorite things that our department gets to do every year.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian, and thank you very much to all the students this year. It's pretty funny because the very first item here says invite Brian Isom here to say a few words, and I completely neglected that point. Went straight down to my meat of the portion. But no, thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight and for your participation with the city. And with that, everyone, we are now moving on to recognition of scheduled public comment. The deadline to sign up to speak for scheduled public comment is Wednesday by 5 p.m. prior to the meeting. Through the city clerk's office, this is an opportunity for the public to address city council. There is an expectation that the presentation will be conducted in a respectful manner, and council may ask questions for clarification, but there will not be any dialogue, and please limit your presentation to 5 minutes. We have about 7 or 8 scheduled for tonight. Gary Kozak, you're up first, here to address council.
Good evening, council. Gary Kozak, Oxford, Alabama.
Yeah.
Is it on now?
All right, there you go.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Gary Kozak, 1260 West Oxford Avenue. And I welcome you guys being here tonight. I handed out just a cover sheet from the Sentinel where an Aurora judge went ahead and ruled against Aurora City Council on their closed meeting laws as well as open meeting laws. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but I think it's something that you guys really need to look at so you don't get faced with a $40,000 fine like they did. Part of that is because that was on salary, and I understand that it's on a consent agenda tonight to finally approve the judge's increase, but I've heard rumor that it might get pulled from that. I'm telling you, that's why I gave you this. Take a close look at it, because I've even got enough to go to court on you. Not that I'm challenging it all. Steve, I live in your district. You were voted there to represent us, the citizens, not just you and your personal opinion. And you guys that are board members of the whole county at large, you got to represent me as well. And anybody else, any resident, you got to represent us. And you keep trying to cut us out of being able to talk and stuff. We're trying to bring light to you and help cover the areas that sometimes you might not understand. But when you shun a lot of people off, then they get a little irritated. Part of it is selective enforcement. The police went out and gave a ticket to a homeless guy smoking in the park, but one of our own council members admitted to smoking in the park. Well, they turned around and I understand they eliminated that ticket. That's called selective enforcement. My truck was attempted to be broke into twice. I got clear pictures of the guy trying to break into my truck. And my neighbor got pictures. I turned in a disc on it, turned in a report, and lo and behold, you know what the officer told me? Well, they didn't get off with your vehicle, so we really short manpower. So I really don't think we're going to get very far with it. Selective enforcement. It goes on and on and on. All sorts of things. I got the picture of the guy that tried to burn my neighbor's fence down because he threw his gas can in the back of my truck. Nothing was ever even brought back to me saying, well, we've made an attempt, but we've never seen this person. But yet on other instances, they're over there knocking on the door. Yeah, my partner had a way back 7, 8 year or whatever 5-year warrant that was no longer valid, and they come knocking on my door and he was out of town. Well, when he came back into town, he had already paid the fee. He notified the officer, sent him the in written that it had been paid, and then he also called the dispatch, and lo and behold, they had a sting when he went out to his car, and I've got it all on video. Guns ready to draw, open the door, ready to throw him on the ground, and he did with the right things, and everything he did right, but here was selective enforcement. They were trying to be tough on somebody, and that still hasn't been solved because it wasn't a crime. We had sold the gal a car and she decided she wanted to get it back. And what happened in the interim had nothing to do with us. She just didn't want the city to go in and take the car from them. Selective service. Now, I do want to give the police department thanks. Last week, the last meeting, there were several people talking about putting a crosswalk on Oxford at Fox. Well, the chief took the monitor off of LaPan Street and put up there. And I'm asking the city council members to request that you get a look at that record and see how many people speed even with a flashing light on them. And how safe is that really? Lastly, I requested a long time ago for 480 Media on a Cora request for the meeting that you had a special meeting in the study session, and one member was not present because she was out of town, and another member was supposed to be online, and I've never received that. That's a violation of state law because I requested it through a media company. You can't do selective servicing when you do that. Lastly, to end up, the police department is shorthanded. Why don't you find some way in the budget, turn around and have more police officers so that we can start controlling some of the crime that we're having out there instead of worrying about our parks and some of the pretty things that, yeah, it'd be nice to upgrade some of these things, but there's budget that
Thank you,
needs to be
Gary
spent.
Kozak. Your
Thank
5
you.
minutes are up. Any questions? Go ahead, Member Wright.
Hello, Mr. Kozak. What was the core request and when did you request it for?
It was the meeting that I think Miss Hathaway was not present. She was out of town, and it was in the study session here, And it was called a special meeting, but it was opened up as a study session. And then they had a small adjournment, and then they never reopened it as a special session. And I had brought to the attention afterwards that a special meeting was only allowed to have one subject, and they had 4 subjects and voted on all 4 of them. As well, it was never opened as a special meeting, so that was a violation of the meeting. And the city council members that are opposed to the judge's salary, people need to know why they oppose it.
Hathaway? So how long ago?
That was,
Oh, Russell, okay. Okay.
I don't remember the exact
There,
date.
I think it was the April
Russell,
8th meeting.
it was me. Hathaway was another Rita. Okay.
During the eclipse.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said.
Oh, okay, so around the 8th. Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Gary, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Up next is Kathleen Bailey, here to address council regarding stormwater infrastructure. Good evening, Kathleen. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Kathleen Bailey, Jason and Union. Good evening, fellow Englewood residents. First tonight, I want to continue to alert residents living in the upstream half of the South Englewood Basin that they currently remain at risk of life-threatening, property-destroying flash flooding like they suffered on 7/24/18. The flood risk the upstream half residents are exposed to was created when the city built blocks and blocks of housing development across the entire surface of that major precipitation drainage way. And in doing so, eliminated the natural surface drainage paths, eliminated the majority of the permeable surface throughout the centuries-old precipitation drainage way, and created man-made canyons that caused deeper channeling of draining precipitation. This known flood risk remains because for decades, as well as currently, this city has refused to spend the money necessary to install the increased main trunk line pipe capacity needed to compensate for developing the houses across the entire surface of that major precipitation drainage way, which, by the way, was required by CDPHE law regulation up until 2003. Currently, displayed on the big screen, is Englewood's flood map depicting depths left behind when the existing age dangerously undersized 2-year rain event capacity main trunk line pipes are hit with an average 25-year rain event. The most severe flood risk of 1 to 6 feet and greater during a 25-year rain event is seen in the flood path through the city's largest 1,221 acres South Englewood Basin that clearly stands out at the lower part of that flood map. Starting with the significant double-legged flooding left behind in residents' yards and homes starting from South Clarkson, you can then see where the double-legged flood joins together as the draining precipitation crosses Broadway at its lowest point and leaves deep floodwater in yards, basements, and first floors as it drains through the Acoma-Bannock area and continues draining northwest towards the South Platte River. Last tonight, I want to directly address what I consider an immoral false claim of protection for those residents made by CM and staff with their contrived Daltug plan. In order to continue to avoid the costs of actually installing 25-year rain event capacity main trunk line pipes in the upstream half of the South Englewood Basin, CM and his staff directed Daltug to assess the Acoma area as if it was a separate little basin, not impacted by the rest of the upstream half that drains directly through the Acoma-Bannock area with every single rain event. And based only on that contrived parameter of pretending the Acoma, that area does not receive any draining precipitation from the rest of the basin it sits in, Daltug identified local ancillary projects around the Acoma area that would protect the pretend separate Acoma area if only the Acoma area itself was hit with a 25-year rain event. This fact was reaffirmed in a 424 email from CM Lewis and Director Rochelle, where they finally identify in writing the sum total of what the city intends to do for the at-risk residents in the upstream half of the South Englewood Basin. Their statement is as follows, quote, "The improvements constructed so far have provided 25-year capacity to the upper portion of the South Englewood Basin west of Broadway, particularly in the Acoma area. The remaining recommended improvements east of Broadway at the far upper end of the basin will reduce localized street flooding, but do not impact private property and are planned for construction in the future," unquote. So all the upstream residents currently have is the Altig plan that works only if no draining precipitation enters the Acoma area from the east side of Broadway. To check the possibility of that reality, just look at the flood path clearly shown on Inglewood's own flood map. I will continue with this at a later meeting. Thank you, fellow Inglewood residents, for 5 minutes of your time.
Kathleen, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, thank you so much. Up next is Jennifer Lambert, here to address council. Hello, Jennifer. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Jennifer Lambert. I'm at Cherokee and Lehigh. I want to start tonight by acknowledging the fact that while I'm addressing all of council, my comments today are spurred by recent public interactions between Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Ward, and the self-named First Amendment auditors who have been present in our city. I want to be clear that I hold the greatest respect for both of you. And though what I have to say tonight might be hard to hear, or you might not agree with it, know that it's said in that spirit. General Charles de Gaulle once said, "Silence is the ultimate weapon of power." I'm here tonight to ask in the strongest of terms that City Council hold its silence in responding to these so-called First Amendment auditors. Their stated goal is to put governmental officials in situations where these officials might restrict their freedoms of speech and press. They claim to do this, ostensibly, to protect constitutional rights on behalf of all citizens. But they do not get to say that they behave the way that they do on my behalf. They do not get to co-opt my voice. So I am here tonight as a resident of Inglewood to use my voice to say that these interactions are harming our community and they need to stop. Let's talk about the First Amendment. I believe that the original intent of the freedoms of speech and press were enacted to allow each of us as free humans to stand and speak truth to power. That we might be able to say things that may be rebellious or subversive or downright revolutionary without threat from the government to our lives or our property. All of what I have heard from these auditors subjugating our city council meetings are doing none of those things. In fact, what they say is nonsense. So when city council members engage with them, whether during a city council meeting or on any other platform, you're giving them relevance and power that they do not inherently have. Freedom of speech also protects your right to speak in defense of yourself. But I would posit that you need no defending. You are currently public servants. You've been asked by the people of Inglewood to serve this community, and that role is special. It's so much bigger than the egos that you would seek to defend. I want to note here that I use the word egos in the yogic sense. The ego is a feature that all humans have. It is an identity through which we interact with the world. When you choose to accept the appointment to public service, you choose to be in service to something bigger than yourself and these identities. In this case, that purpose is the city of Inglewood. During the city council meetings that I have watched or attended, I have seen Inglewood citizens speak about myriads of legitimate concerns that warrant attention more than these auditors. When city council members give relevance and power to auditors, you remove relevance and power from Inglewood citizens that come to speak their concerns to the people they elected to represent them and their interests. Before I wrap up, I want to talk about behavior. As a student of psychology, I know that a behavior will continue as far as a behavior is rewarded. However, when seeking to extinguish a behavior by taking away the reward, there is a period of time where the behavior will escalate before it extinguishes. I imagine that when you remove the reward of your attention and engagement, that the auditor's behavior will escalate. I ask that in response, you hold strong and give nothing worthwhile to post on their forums. If their behavior escalates to harassment and this harassment is verbal, then it should be ignored. I know that this aspect is hard, and at the same time it is necessary. Their verbal escalations are designed to provoke reactions. Don't give in. My ask in concrete terms is that during council meetings, your response be thank you for your concerns and nothing else. Outside of city council meetings, be bigger, be stronger, and let your silence resound.
Jennifer, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, Jennifer, thank you again.
Thank you.
If you could please hold your applause, members of the public. Up next is Regan here to address council regarding council members and city manager.
Hello, dearly beloved. We are gathered here tonight to get through this thing called life. Hopefully we all live through it with the jokey jokesters from the hashtag Stephen Joe Show, with special guest appearance from Sean Lewis, the city manager who's currently being ran by the employees of Inglewood's control freak factory known as the Inglewood Public Library, where you too can ban anyone from the public library and then get the cops to validate your hurt feelings over a camera by staking claim you're a victim of a camera. Hey, Sean, that was a super cute little no recording on public property administrative order thingy you tried to emulate off the good work of Devin Granberry. It was so cute. You guys like my acting? Oh my God, this is so fun. I can't wait for more. I cannot wait for you guys to demand your esteemed Inglewood PD use violence on us. Keep giggling, Joey boy, to keep us from recording. On the topic of perpetuating and supporting violence against peaceful people, it's what is the supported climate and culture of only in America, where physically assaulting people because you don't like what they have to say is the common norm. It's more commonly known now as police violence, and it's cheered and celebrated when the police use violence on people for their speech. Don't think so? Oh yeah, it's true. Well, I have to share my lively arrest history with you next time, Joe, and you'll be so pleasantly shocked how many of my cases have ended up dismissed and how federal lawsuits against real bad actors come to light. Some people are in love with the idea of violence against women due to their spoken words. However, we are all now certainly no strangers to the ongoing victimization that the Stephen Joe Show have now subscribed to with honor, and Joe's willingness to stand by his dedicated spirit of free speech to do it again on a channel that highlights violence on people with cameras. An entertainer from a foreign country, a YouTube channel that highlights violence against peaceful people, all for the sake of comedy. Did you know it's super hilarious that your friend, Frauditer Troll, in fact, and admittedly hired a guy by the name of Jeff Little to follow me? Not just follow me, but stalk me. Giggle, Joe, come on, giggle. It's funny as hell. Well, this is about to get super comedic as it gets. So if you don't like offensive language, you should leave the room now or stick your fingers deep into your ears as I cite an email that was sent to Christopher Cordova and I. It's gonna get spicy, Mayor. The email is titled Denver Police Conduct, and it comes from an email address, fuck your 1A rights at Proton Mail. The contents of the email, and I quote, here's the deal. We're tired of your attitude. Come on, Joe, giggle. It's funny. Let me get back to the quote. You and that taco nigger Cordova have fucked with public employees for the last time. You will take down your channels or the following will happen. Number one, Regan Benson will be doxxed, including her social security number on Troll Mafia. To prove I'm not fucking around, and they cited my social security number, and it's the right number. Number two, they cite, I will personally murder every one of you in public, given your cunt behavior. I doubt Sheridan PD will lift a finger and a jury won't convict me. Are you guys getting those kinds of emails? Probably not, huh? Guess who's responsible for releasing all that information? Sheridan PD. And they just did it again. Less than 2 weeks ago, after your punk ass shit show
Ms.
on
Benson.
Christopher and myself. This is what you two perpetuate. It's what you want. You want violence on peaceful people for speech. And you're worried about Saucy? Really, Mayor? You're worried about Saucy. How hilarious is all of it? Your evidence preservation demand letter, Joe, is sitting with the clerk since you failed to acknowledge it via email, since you've interjected yourself into a criminal case that your stupid cops generated
Regan,
on
your
me.
5 minutes are up. Thank you for your time. Any questions for Regan? Thank you again for your time tonight. Up next is Chris Cordova, here to address council. Chris, if you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
I don't know who is the one that's responsible for the timer, but there's a lot of inconsistencies last time. And I know you guys were talking about changing the rule, but to my knowledge, it's still that it should start after the speaker says their name and cross streets, or they just start their speech like I did. The first speaker last time, their timer started 32 seconds after he said his name and address. And I know he had a thumb drive to plug in, but after he started his presentation, the timer started 17 seconds later. There were several people who their time started after they said their name and not the address. Some people had, there was one lady who had her timer started when she was in the middle of her name. And my time actually started after Mayor Sierra asked me to say my name and address. I didn't even speak yet and my timer got started. I lost 4 seconds. Regan Benson also lost 4 seconds because her timer started after she said the word good when she was doing a mic check by saying, "Good evening, can you hear me?" So I think we need to be more consistent on that, guys. And Regan Benson and I lost the most time. I don't know if, you probably say, oh, that wasn't intentional, but out of all the people that either gained or lost time, we got the biggest shaft, so. But I would like to start by thanking the 3 ladies on my right. Ms. Prang isn't here, but I would like to thank you ladies for standing up to this bully over here. I know that takes a lot of courage to do. And Ms. Prang, I know I was teasing you a little bit last time, so thank you. But I did a public records request on Joe Anderson and Steve Ward and their emails because I wanted to see if there was anything that would link them to this troll channel. And there was no responsive records. So if that's true, that means Joe Anderson, you're the one that reached out to them. And I say you because I'm pretty sure you're the ringleader, not Steve. And Steve, I'll be honest with you, I don't think you're an evil person. I really don't. I think that you have good intentions. I really do. I think you're misinformed and you make really poor decisions. And yeah, you piss me off a lot. But that's how I feel about this council. You guys are not as bad as Sheridan. I mean, that's not saying much because it doesn't take too much to be better than Sheridan, but you're not. Except for Joe Anderson, though. You'd fit right in with them. You are a very dark energy, low vibrational soul disguised as a pastor. And I came to that conclusion by that stupid smirk that's on your face right now, the same one that you had the entire time last time, right? Because you loved it. And I was thinking, why would he reach out to this troll channel? He knows it's going to get me back up here, but then it hit me. That's what you want, right? You love the attention. You love it. Because you're a narcissist. And narcissists love attention, whether it's good or bad. So it reminded me of a kid who gave up candy for Lent. And then finally he got to have his first lollipop. Yeah, he's back, right? So after you turned this city council meeting into a Jerry Springer show, you said, quote, they test the boundaries of what they can get away with. You can't get away with rights. You said they try to find something that's legal, but that they can provoke a reaction from. Like Jennifer Lambert said that too, so. But that's also a narcissistic trait. You see, I don't provoke reactions. I go and I peacefully record. And if somebody else is going to get irate and then blame me, that's called blame shifting. It's a narcissistic trait. Miss Lambert, she might suffer from that too. So I absolutely do not provoke reactions. I really don't. And even if I was provoking a reaction, just for the sake of the argument, you sure as hell give me a good reaction, don't you, Joe? And I don't even want to keep coming back here. I know that's what you want, so hopefully I won't have to come back because, it's very high stress to come here. It really is. And like Ms. Prank said, now we're wasting how many tax dollars on all this extra security? We had 4 officers here last time, right? Because you guys need security because you guys did something foolish. You're making a mockery of this city council, right? Not us, not Ms. Benson and I. You and you guys are. And your colleagues see right through it. You're not fooling anyone. I don't think you're trying to fool anyone. You're just scumbag and you're happy about it. And it's really sad. I think that there is a lot of hope for a lot of these people out here. Ms. Niles, even Mr. Lewis. I mean, I'm pissed off about that administrative order. I don't know if that's going to be going through, but that's a terrible thing that you would do that. But again, I don't think you're quite as bad as Cranberry yet. But so I just wanted to put that on the record, that we're not here to provoke a reaction, okay? And exercising your rights is not getting away with anything, Mr. Anderson.
Chris, your 5 minutes are up. Any questions for Chris Cordova? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time. Up next is David Gilbert, here to address council. Good evening, David. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Good evening, Desi. You can hear me?
Yes.
Hi, David Gilbert. I live at Oxford and Lipan. Excuse me. From my backyard, I can hear light rail trains at the Oxford station. My front door is 800 feet from the rec center. And yet, when I want to walk with my 2 young children to either of those amenities, I make all of us put on reflective vests as we prepare to sprint across Oxford. I certainly don't take my boys at night after we came within inches of being hit by a driver while legally crossing at the crosswalk on Oxford and Navajo. Up until 2 years ago, the city was publishing monthly updates on a proposed pedestrian bridge crossing Oxford to the light rail station, as well as a proposed replacement of the Broadway Bridge over Hampton. When the lowest bids came in over budget, the projects were shelved until further notice. Looking at the capital project requests presented to council in April, I see it appears the pedestrian bridge that might make it possible for me and my children to more safely access the light rail station has been pushed back to 2028 at best. Looking further, I found this statement regarding this year's capital projects budget. The Tier 1 capital project fund request of approximately $15.2 million exceeds the available estimated funds of $4 million. That's a difference of more than $11 million this year alone. Other bike and pedestrian safety projects are still years out, according to the presentation, including street rehabilitation and safety improvements on Logan and Broadway, pedestrian crossings on numerous streets, including on Oxford, pedestrian bridges over Hampton and Santa Fe, sidewalks along Bellevue where none currently exist. Meanwhile, this spring, I continue to see this marketing campaign for a Parks and Recreation bond that includes millions of dollars in water slides. More than $9 million of the bond package proposed so far is earmarked for water slides and rebuilding a pool at Pirates Cove, and millions more for a surf simulator at the rec center. The city's polling around the Parks and Recreation bond proposal shows the public has little interest in these projects. Nearly 3/5 of survey respondents said they never visit Pirates Cove. Both the rec center and Pirates Cove projects were the only components of the bond package to receive less than majority approval in the survey. The Pirates Cove projects were also cited as by far the lowest priority by survey respondents. And yet tonight, even the smallest of the bond packages presented to council still includes $6 million earmarked mostly for the colossal slide at Pirates Cove. Neither the water slide or the surf simulator are being proposed because residents have asked for them. In fact, the FAQ for the bond says new amenities like the surf simulator will, quote, help generate additional revenue. Another answer about the rec center in Pirates Cove says as a result of the improvements, staff will, quote, adjust the pricing as deemed necessary. In short, I feel I am being asked to vote to raise taxes to build projects the public does not want that will likely increase the cost of visiting the rec center I already have trouble taking my kids to because there's not enough money to build pedestrian infrastructure to get us there. There's a lot to like in the rest of the Parks and Rec bond. As our society loses third places, functional and accessible parks are crucial gathering places and vital for public health. And yet recently a coalition of neighbors came before you pleading for safe pedestrian crossings on Oxford and Fox. The most recent revision of the Walk and Wheel Master Plan, which spells out bike and pedestrian safety needs, listed 13 completed projects and 53 outstanding projects, including the very pedestrian crossings those neighbors asked for, which the master plan recommended building this year. The Oxford Station Transit-Oriented Development Plan How am I doing? Oxford Station Transit-Oriented Development Plan says to have a successful redevelopment of an industrial area into higher density residential, infrastructure should precede redevelopment. Yet, for the next several years at least, the apartment buildings already springing up along South Navajo will be advertised as an easy walk to the light rail station, while residents must continue to sprint across 5 lanes of traffic at an intersection designed to serve an industrial district, not a residential neighborhood, with hopes that maybe one day the pedestrian bridge will be built. Meanwhile, the FAQ for the Parks and Recreation Bond promises most of the projects will be complete by winter 2027. I wish I was being asked to vote on a bond to make headway on the wider backlog of capital projects citywide with that kind of urgency. I am concerned that if council goes forward with a bloated and overpriced parks bond, the city will burn up political capital that will make it more difficult to ask voters to fund critical infrastructure upgrades. Before you decide whether to send this bond to voters, I urge you, keep this proposal reasonable. Englewood has many bike and pedestrian infrastructure needs that should come before water slides. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your time tonight. Members of the public can hold their applause. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none. Thank you for your time tonight, David. And last for scheduled public comment is Jan Weipert, here to address council. Hello, Jan, if you could just state your name and your address.
Jan Weipert, Federal and Bellevue. So I'm here tonight. I was trying to figure out what my topic was, and I decided safety was my topic. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about was how do we get safety in this city? And it's not real simple. I was thinking about the crosswalk by the rec center and how that so desperately is needed. And yet, yes, here's this money going to Pirates Cove, where the majority of people that use it don't even live here. So who are we looking out for? Are we looking out for the citizens of Englewood or others? So one of the things I believe too is we need to follow the rule of law. There are little things that sometimes help stop criminal activities. Traffic may be one of them. Gary Kozak just talked about an officer saying there wasn't time to follow up on some type of maybe a misdemeanor. I just was speaking to another citizen this last week who the police took away in handcuffs, but there was never any kind of an arrest report made. And since I don't have their permission to talk about it and I didn't follow up on it, I won't share their name. But there is something desperately wrong here with our what's going on with safety. There's been discussion on the internet about blowback following Trump's guilty verdict. I don't see patriots rising up to riot from this outcome, although the internet is full of buzz. If it happens, it will be due to the anti-free world pushing for violence, such as seen in Washington, Oregon, and college campuses these last 2 months. Outsiders, which are being invited into Englewood by specifically 2 of our city council members. I'm hoping that a discussion with city council, the chief of police, maybe the city attorney, to deputize some citizens in case their help is needed. We need to do something to help our police force. There could be potential food shortages, water shortages, police shortages, obviously, planned pandemic. What are we doing for Englewood Water Park? We have illegal aliens flooding our country, mostly military-aged men, single from China, Venezuela, the Mideast, other places. We do have a candidate running in this area to replace Jason Crow. John Fabricatori is a retired ICE agent. He's very concerned about this. Englewood should be also. This free speech issue, I was so happy to hear a couple of people talk about that. I fully believe in free speech. It helps us to look at ourselves. The great thing about Joe and Steve talking online like this, it shows how left they really are, how little they really care about our city. This leftist conclave of four, Joe, Steve, Othaniel, and Chelsea, now we see them. They're showing their colors. It's okay. You can be leftist. That's what we allow is free speech in this country. They will not vote against one another, nor will they say, hey, what were you doing? What were you thinking? But we see you. We do see your smirk, Joe. I really liked that. It was appropriate. But you know what? Thanks for exercising your right. I hope you'll continue to allow us to exercise our right with free speech. Safety for Englewood is huge. And I do appreciate that we have some people that will speak up and say, hey, what are you doing? Is this appropriate? Maybe it's not appropriate for city council to bring divisiveness into the city. I think that's anytime we speak out, we have to say, are we being divisive? And you two have. You've brought it to our city. It's not okay. You're supposed to be held to a higher standard. I don't know what I can say that makes things any better. There's no better. You guys haven't wakened up. Chelsea, the three of you, you haven't awakened even after the recall efforts. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none, thank you for your time. That concludes scheduled public comment. We're moving on to unscheduled public comment. We have 8 speakers here tonight for unscheduled. Up first is Kevin Wright with no topic given. Forgot to mention, Steve, you're giving a response to public comment tonight. Hello, Kevin. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Name's Kevin Wright, Federal and Tufts. I'm here tonight to discuss defending our constitutional rights. Supreme Court's landmark decision in New York Times versus Sullivan 1964, case number 376 U.S. 254. The fundamental principle of public debate on issues of governance must be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, even if it includes vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government officials. This ruling safeguards the First Amendment rights of every American citizen to freely criticize public officials without fear of retaliation or suppression. Retaliation or suppression. In our community, it appears that Mayor Pro Tem Joe Anderson and Council Member Steve Ward have violated these constitutional protections by retaliating against Chris Cordova and Reagan Benson for their comments during city council meetings. Such actions undermine the very essence of our democratic system and the right of citizens to hold their elected representatives accountable. The proposed changes to public comment laws raise concerns of further retaliation and restrictions on public discourse. We must not sit idly by and allow our fundamental rights to be eroded. As such, I have filed a complaint with the ACLU towards both you, Mayor Pro Tem Anderson, and Steve Ward, council member. You violated civil rights in this room. Such actions undermine the very essence of our democratic system and the right of citizens to hold their elected officials representatives accountable. We will not sit back and allow you guys to do this to us. Like I said, I filed a complaint with the ACLU today. I am going to file with the CCRD next, Colorado Civil Rights Division. I call for immediate resignation of Steve Ward and Joe Anderson for their unacceptable conduct and disregard for our constitutional rights. Furthermore, any decisions regarding public comment policy should exclude their involvement, as their actions have demonstrated clear bias and intent to suppress free speech. We must stand firm in defending our cherished liberties enshrined in the First Amendment. Public officials who cannot withstand criticism from the public have no place in our democratic system. It is time for Ward and Anderson to do the right thing and step down or face the consequences of their actions. Thank you.
Kevin, members of the public, please hold your applause. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, thank you for your time.
No, I do.
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, go ahead.
How are we related?
We are married.
Did I have any part in any actions or the writing of your public comment this evening?
Oh, no. We can thank Grok, Copilot, and artificial intelligence for all the information I was able to put together, find out, and help me to file my suit with the ACLU this morning.
Okay, that's what I needed for the record. Thank
Yes,
you so
ma'am.
much.
All right, no further comments or questions, thank you. Up next is Tanya Diller with no topic given. Hello, Tanya, if you wouldn't mind giving your name and address or cross streets.
Hi, I'm Tanya Diller, a 20-year resident of Eastman and South Grant Street. I'm here to address and update you on Movement 5280 and the hub's expansion. It has come to my attention that Arapahoe County was well aware of 5280's plans for expansion. I don't understand how both the city and the county claim that they didn't know what was going on despite disclosure of this information in two separate articles by the Englewood Herald, with the earliest dating back to a year ago on June 7th, stating the plan for on-site transitional housing for 23 men. Then again, most recently, Englewood Herald article dated April 24th, 2024 stated in great detail the Phase 1 and Phase 2 plans that were submitted to Arapahoe County to receive the ARPA grant in January of 2023. That article proves that Arapahoe County did know exactly what 5280's full plans were a year and a half ago without mentioning it to anyone in the Hawthorne neighborhood that it's in the middle of. To let the rest of council know and the city know what those are, I'll read the article quote. Phase 1, housing up to 12 homeless individuals in retrofitted quads in the building for transitional housing ages 21 to 29 with a live-in staff member. Phase 2, providing transitional housing for 24 more individuals by 2025 on 2 lots of the new property. So first of all, this isn't even allowed in our residential neighborhood, which is zoned R1C. No more than 8 persons are permitted per property within the R1C zone district. So if a zoning change or a PUD is requested, just know that the entire neighborhood minus 1 family is going to fight this request. And we do expect 100% transparency this time, which was not given from the start or we wouldn't be here. Let me also remind you of how this building also still breaks the drug-free zone law in Colorado, which stipulates minimum distance of 1,000 feet between drug rehab centers and educational facilities. Movement 5280 is under 1,000 feet of St. Louis Catholic School, Bishop Elementary, and Thrive Preschool. Why is this still not being addressed? Do we not care about the safety of Englewood's children? I have 3 children on the street myself, and I'm quite concerned of what this will bring if this expansion is allowed. I'm also wondering why a mediator was brought in instead of just actually following the state and city laws. It is the city council's job to protect its residents, children, and future. I know there's big money to be made in the homeless initiative, and that's clearly a push, but please listen to your residents, your voters, and community. When we are pleading with you, do not allow the zoning changes or the growth of Movement 5280's hub that will absolutely take down our quaint residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for your time tonight. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Up next is Micah Haynes with no topic given. Hello, Micah. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Hi, I'm Micah Haynes. My cross streets are Mansfield and Elati. I wanted to say thank you guys for hearing me tonight, and I came to say that although I do understand points that have been brought up here tonight already, I wanted to say that with the obvious clown show that's going on here, things that are going on that none of us want to spend time wasting our time listening to, I thought that the two council members who decided to point out the ridiculousness of this were entirely warranted in doing so. It was completely appropriate. So, and also, especially when they made it very clear that they weren't speaking on behalf of city council when they were doing it. So, thank you for doing that, guys.
Micah, thank you very much for your time. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none, Micah, thank you for your time tonight. Up next is Tim Nichols, here to also speak about the First Amendment auditors. Tim, if you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Tim Nichols. I'm at Pennsylvania in Hamden. Thank you for hearing me tonight. A wise man who understood government finance once said that there's really no such thing as government money. It's all taxpayer money. That's true. This microphone, this podium, it was bought and it's maintained by taxpayer money. And it's here for a purpose. It's here so that anybody in this city can show up on a Monday night and have access to all of you. And that's a really beautiful thing. And over the years I've lived here, I've heard people come and talk about trash. I've heard people come and talk about a thing that it had called different city departments about and hadn't been able to get any movement. And this is their last stop and they don't know what else to do. It's great that we have this. And once upon a time, we never had to worry about people coming in from outside of the city who aren't part of us and abusing this. And those days, guys, are clearly behind us. And it's hard to know what to do with that. This is obviously not what this is for, and yet here we are. There's an old bit of Jewish wisdom on this, 2 sentences, and they go together. Don't answer a fool according to his folly, lest you become like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. And those 2 sentences go together precisely. So which is it? Answer him or don't? Well, it's hard. And that's kind of the point. But the point is, it's hard to know what to do, but the parameters are, don't join the clown show. Don't become another one of the clowns. Do point out that the clown show is a clown show. Let it be seen for what it is. So whether as individual members of the council you choose to just let it be beneath your notice and focus on other things, or whether you choose to speak to it, that's up to each of you to decide how your gifts come together and how they work for that. But this, you don't have to let anybody use this. You could limit it to Englewood citizens and business owners. You would be within your rights. You could do that, and I would encourage you to do it. Thank you for your time.
Tim, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions for Tim? Seeing none, thank you for your time tonight. Up next is Kathy Naughton with no topic given. Good evening. Kathy, if you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Kathy Naughton, Jason, and Union. I saw the now widely circulated YouTube video that our 2 city council members recently completed. One of you surprised me. I'm sure both of you think this validates your attitude towards the citizens as you attacked the most vocal. I know many of us in the audience who have chosen to speak to council in the past have felt the same disregard, disdain, and righteous attitude by a small group of our council. You may think you are winning support, when in actuality, you are pointing out the adversarial behavior that has been quietly pervasive for a while. I have a suggestion that may help you sort through your persecuted feelings. Check your health insurance policy. Most have plans that allow counseling visits that can help you discuss these thoughts in a more private venue. You may also consider the quote by someone who's spent considerable time in the political arena, Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high.
Kathy, thank you for your time tonight. Any questions for members of council? If you could please limit your applause. Seeing none, thank you for your time. Up next is Carla Wakefield, here to speak about neighborhood safety. Good evening, Carla. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Sure, my name is Carla Wakefield. I live near Eastman and Grant. I'd like to talk about neighborhood safety, specifically Movement 5280, otherwise known as the Hub. I'm a 25-year resident of Englewood. My husband and I purchased our home approximately 18 years ago as a place to raise our kids, have our grandkids come, just have a place that we could have a family. And it was a great place to raise our children. All three of them graduated from Englewood High School, just a great place. But over the course of the last several months, close to a year now, we've had a lot of different things going on in the neighborhood. A lot of people, increased foot traffic, people walking, leaving grocery carts, loitering in yards. There's been calls from neighbors about camping in cars. Most recently, there has been a truck and camper that has been stationed at various spots over the course of about a 2-block radius that moves frequently. That's been called, the police have been called several times by my neighbors. Most recently, it was parked in front of my house, and I had to call the police about it. The police came, they knocked on the doors of the truck, on the camper that's attached, that's on the back of the truck. Nobody responds. They said they can't see in the truck. There's so much stuff in there they can't tell what's going on, but they try to increase patrols. It's very unnerving. My elderly mother lives with us. She doesn't want to go out and walk. She doesn't feel safe. She moved here for us to take care of us, and I feel like I can't even do that now. Loitering in the yards. We most recently, just last week, had some people, unbeknownst to us, sitting, leaning up against our fence, talking. My mom couldn't quite tell what they were saying, but she was outside and she got scared, so she came in the house. By the time my husband got off of his work meeting and went outside, they were gone. So I don't know what was going on, but it's unnerving when they're leaning up against my fence, sitting there. She said they were probably there about a half an hour. So it's just concerning, and I've seen them sitting. She actually was able to get my husband, we took pictures, or they took pictures of somebody sitting on my neighbor's sidewalk for a half an hour, staring at my husband's truck, and then came around and was observing my husband's truck. Back to my family, my kids. My kids have kids, I have grandkids. They are not comfortable bringing their kids to my house. I'd like to have my grandkids over and spend the night and play, but they've been honest and said, we don't know that we're comfortable with that, Mom. That's not why I bought my home. I mean, it's more than a home. I could pack up and move. I could buy a home somewhere else, but that's not why we live in Englewood. We wanted to stay here long term. We're trying to do some remodeling on our home. Our home lost $60,000 in value over the course of 2 months because of this. That's, again, something we were trying to do for our family for the future. And it's just unnerving for everything that's going on right now, and we're really concerned about public safety in our neighborhoods for our families.
Carla, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions for Carla tonight? Seeing none, Carla, thank you for your time. Up next is Eric Montel, here to speak about the First Amendment. Is he here tonight? I don't think I see him. Up next is Kristen Beard, here to talk about the park bond. Hello, Kristen. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Hello.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Beard, and I live near Logan in Cornell. Tonight, I am here to represent myself and other parents in my neighborhood that could not attend tonight regarding the parks bond. I have a special needs son whose entire Medicaid goal is to safely be outside. We pass 3 parks on our daily 1-mile walk, and 2 of them are just open grass with nothing to do. There are no paths, not much shade, and so no one uses them. These proposals would offer many of the parks more places to play than what currently exists, including ADA features. Having some additional shade and playgrounds would be great, and in my opinion, would provide more places to play, not less. I personally have not heard from neighbors and friends the concerns of native plants, but I have heard tonight that it is a concern for some. Could we have a percentage of each park that everyone is comfortable with regarding the amount of native planting? I have met with the director and deputy director of Parks and Rec a couple of times, and they have been super open to feedback. They were at the neighborhood night asking questions and taking feedback, and I think that they would be really open to any idea that we have. I am unsure what surveys you are doing or that have been done. I know myself and my neighbors and friends weren't asked. The people that I have talked to are super excited about the improvements at the rec center in Pirates Cove. I do disagree about the surf simulator. I think it sounds fun for all ages and would provide something for all family members and ages to enjoy. It's what the parents I'm talking to are actually very excited about. I would also like to say that David and some others' comments about public safety and funding are relevant and super important, but for me, the 2 topics are not mutually exclusive. I believe we can bring forward important proposals on safety and still have some updates to our water parks, rec center, and parks. As far as which proposal to choose from, the difference between these proposals is such a small amount yearly compared to what we would get for it. I would gladly pay an extra $33 a year to have every park touched and increase ADA accessibility, and I support the proposal in full. Thank you.
Kristen, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, Kristen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And that concludes unscheduled public comment. Member Ward, you are able to give response when you are ready.
Thank you, Mayor. I saw a number of District 4 constituents here tonight, many of whom were here to disagree with my behavior. And anytime I disappoint the constituents of District 4, it's disappointing to me. When I ran for office, I ran with the promise of increasing civility in Englewood, and in particular on this dais and on council as a whole. I did something that was controversial, appearing on the Frauditor Troll YouTube channel. I did it very deliberately. I made that choice because, well, for a number of reasons, but I felt like I had something to say that this room was not the appropriate venue to say. And to the extent that that has caused more fracture in our public discourse and in our city, it's regrettable. I can't say that I wouldn't do it again the way that I did it, but it did have consequences, as speech always does. Moving on, I will try to acknowledge everyone, all of the Englewood residents who were present in the room tonight. Mr. Kozak, you and I are long overdue for a cup of coffee. Let's grab one sometime. Maybe we can hash some things out. I know that we're not going to agree on a lot of things. You probably know that as well. But it'll be an opportunity for us to sit down and talk and try to find some common ground, or at least understand one another a little better. I think that works better than sitting up here and barking at you while you sit down there and bark at me and going back and forth that way. So let's try to do that. If you don't mind emailing me, I'll do my best to get back to you. I just came back from vacation, so I've got a couple of busy weeks, but I think we can squeeze in some time. To Ms. Bailey, I will say Ms. Bailey comes here quite often and speaks about stormwater infrastructure. She's also a District 4 constituent. And she's definitely entitled to her opinion. She's definitely unquestionably done a lot of research on Inglewood stormwater infrastructure and past research and current research and reports. And ultimately what it boils down to for me is that I am uncomfortable substituting my own opinion on something as complex and expensive as stormwater for the opinion of the engineers that our city hires to manage stormwater. So we have a recommendation from our engineers. We've broken ground on a number of projects. Many of them seem to be mitigating the conditions. Stormwater is something where it's very difficult or often cost prohibitive to find a perfect plan. And I think that the plan that we have right now, including the added detention pond, retention ponds that are going in, detention, I always get those words mixed up, so does everybody else, should enhance the ability of the system to move water from places where we don't want it to be to places where we need it to be in order to keep the city safe. Ms. Lambert, I so appreciate your comments. I appreciate the tone that they were delivered in. I think they have great value. I did make some comments tonight about what's been going on. I can't promise will be the last thing I have to say about it, but I think you offer some sage advice that I myself am inclined to take. So I appreciate you coming here and providing me with that feedback. Mr. Gilbert and Ms. Beard demonstrate an interesting dilemma for me as a member of this council. I have one constituent telling me to do one thing and another constituent telling me to do something completely different. You know, it's interesting with something like a parks bond because there's a ballot box, and that really is where the decision gets made under the Colorado Constitution. We, this body, have the option of deciding what projects we want to pursue or what projects we would like parks to pursue or how much debt we're willing to draw. But ultimately, the decision of whether or not that gets done falls to the voters. My suspicion is that we will probably end up referring something to the ballot. I don't know. We have another discussion coming up about that. But you've both given us some things to chew on relative to what the city actually needs and timing of it for sure. So I appreciate you coming out tonight. And I should point out that Mr. Gilbert, also one of my District 4 constituents. So District 4 is fired up representing. Ms. Weipert, you know, your comments on the crosswalk near the rec center are noted. It's not something that we can fast track or, you know, push to happen. There's a lot of things that need to happen before we can install a crosswalk or even really get ready to install a crosswalk. But as I understand it, there is a council request in place regarding that crosswalk. And we should be expecting some new information later, and perhaps the manager can weigh in on that when I'm finished addressing the rest of the public commenters. Mr. Wright hits on an interesting question. Did Councilmember Anderson and I somehow violate someone's rights by exercising our own First Amendment rights? I don't think so. That's why the courts are there. So I'll just leave it at that. I would welcome potentially, well, I'd probably resent it, but if there is an opportunity for me to be found in the right in court, I'll take it. And likewise, if a court were to find somehow, magically, by exercising my First Amendment rights that I violated someone else's, then I would take my lumps. Ms. Diller and Ms. Wakefield, regarding Movement 5280, I know that you both know that there's a process unfolding right now related to the Good Neighbor Agreement. I'm not sure exactly where that is, but we have received some updates on that. And we're facing an interesting legal conundrum that hasn't quite unfolded yet. So I know that it's frustrating to sit there and watch your neighborhood change around you. I have great empathy for what you're going through. I'm not sure what, if anything, this body is empowered to do right now to solve those problems, other than what we're already doing. Engaging the neighborhood, sending out extra patrols, making sure that there's a police response that occurs when the police are called, and working with the organization as well to try to build a relationship that the neighbors can survive through, and potentially thrive through. And this is something that I think will unfold over time, and I hope that we are able to reach a peaceful resolution. And I think that covers just about everything I have on the list. So I'm finished. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Member Ward. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I just did want to say a couple of words here since some of these comments were again directed at me. I'm starting my timer just to ensure that if I go longer than 3 minutes, I don't get accused of going longer than 5. But I do want to speak to this a little bit because, and I respect Jennifer Lambert a lot. I like what she had to say, and I think that that is totally a valid approach, is to just say we're not going to engage with it, and that may or may not, on some occasions, work to have something distasteful go away. I know that some have taken that advice. I haven't. It's just not generally my approach, is when I see people that I respect within our city, staff, citizens, police, getting pushed around and within doing their jobs, and they want somebody to respond to that. I want to respond to that, so I took the opportunity to respond to that. There is a little analogy from Chesterton I wanted to share with you all. He said, if a man comes along and pushes an old lady into traffic, and another sees it and rushes in to push her out of the way before she gets struck by an oncoming car, it won't do to speak of them both as though they're the kind of people who shove old ladies around in traffic. It's one thing to come to the city and create a stir. It's another thing to stand up to the people who do those things. And I do enjoy exercising my First Amendment rights, and would like to continue to exercise opportunities to do that. Now, I have gotten some feedback that going on a YouTube channel called The Fraudster Troll is distasteful or unprofessional, and I get it. It would have maybe looked better on me if I would have put on a tie and gone onto some policy think tank channel or PBS special to talk about First Amendment auditors. Problem is, those people weren't calling me. And secondly, I wanted to do something that would hit the so-called auditors where it hurts, and these are YouTube clout chasers. And to speak on the issue on a YouTube channel, I think is a great place to do that if you want to have the affected outcome that you would like. So another thing to speak to, this is my last comment, I'm at 2 minutes and 12 seconds, is that one thing that I've done very intentionally in my response is I'm not doing it with a sad face. And that's very intentional. And the reason for that is because the goal of the First Amendment auditors is to create discomfort in the people that they're going after. And I wanted to show that that doesn't really work on me, and I think I've demonstrated that quite well. So thank you all for coming out. I understand different approaches to this, but I do stand behind my response. Thank you, Mayor.
Member Russell.
Thank you. I just have a couple of council requests from the speakers. The two that Gary Kozak gave, he asked if we could get a record of the traffic monitor that was at Fox and Oxford. And I think it was just moved up there recently. The other request that he had is the Cora request that was never answered. And I think the mayor was correct. It probably did happen around the eclipse, which would have been April 8th.
Yeah.
So I think those are the only two council requests I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Wright.
And I'd like to ask, per council request, last council meeting, Member Prang asked for the additional costs for security and police coverage. I would like to add the cost for the extra police and allied staffing, and the reasons for why for this meeting also, please, in a council request.
Thank you, Member Wright. So I'll cover those two. Those will be covered as part of the executive session on the 17th. There's just information that we're not able to divulge to the public in terms of just a security response. So we'll be covering that as part of an executive session on the 17th.
But the dollar amounts will be public.
Probably not the dollar amounts either, but that may be part of the discussion that we have on the 17th about what can and cannot be disclosed.
Okay, yeah, because I'd like to be as transparent as possible.
City Attorney Niles, if you want to weigh in.
Mayor, we anticipate that we will provide the dollar amounts publicly, but not the specific safety arrangements and security arrangements and legal concerns that led to the recommendation for additional staffing.
So will we be able to say why we had the additional security, but not the hows, the inner workings of? Or can we discuss that at executive session, and then once that's decided?
Well, we will provide the dollar amounts. And I believe city staff is already working on the dollar amounts from the last meeting. And we'll produce that. That's public information. Then we have a scheduled executive session coming up on security arrangements and security concerns. And there's a provision in statute that allows us to discuss that in executive session to ensure the safety of the governing body.
Okay. Okay, so I guess that really doesn't answer my question. After the executive session, will we be able to be transparent on some of the whys, but not the hows?
Yes, but I would recommend we do so in general terms because disclosure of specific details could contribute to someone's attempt to break the law. But in general, anything that we can produce publicly, I support that and encourage us to do so rather than discussing it in executive session.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would ask for that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Wright. So I'm not sure if there's a new council request, and there may be the allied security. I don't know if that was covered by Tina last time around, but
Right, and,
yeah.
And I would like that for both.
Yeah.
Because we do have
I think
extra allied.
City Attorney
here
knows
also.
you have a good understanding of what's being requested, correct? Okay, perfect. All right, seeing nothing else, that concludes public comment. Are we good to move on to the rest of the agenda? All right, sounds good. I have two items that are being pulled tonight, just 9A1 and 982. I'm sorry, go ahead.
9C2.
9C2 as well, okay. Any others?
I'm sorry, what was pulled?
9A1 and 2 and 9C2.
So three.
Three of them, yeah. We have one left right now, consent. All right, I think we're good. So can I get a motion to approve 9C1?
Move to approve 9C1.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Russell. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Member Russell, you had a question on 9A1.
Yes, 9A1, and I did speak with the city attorney just before the meeting. The one question that I have, well, no, one question that I had has already been answered. But did you write down the questions that I asked you?
Yes, I do. I have them.
Well, no, I mean the city attorney,
Oh.
because I talked to her and,
Oh, sorry, City Attorney Niles, go ahead. Didn't realize you were up at the podium. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I didn't write them down, but I'd be happy to share with the entire council what you and I discussed.
okay,
So the background behind this agenda item, which amends municipal code to state that despite the maximum penalties allowed by our code, the actual penalty or fine or sentence imposed shall not exceed that of state law. And the reason is because the 14th Amendment guarantees equal
equal protection of the laws. And so if someone is prosecuted in district court or state court for one offense, and then they're prosecuted in municipal court for the same action, that they should receive the same punishment. So several courts have been, municipal courts have been the subject of litigation recently when their fine or sentence imposed significantly exceeded the same fine or sentence that would have been imposed in district court for, say, shoplifting or something like that. There are multiple cases where we have what's called concurrent jurisdiction. So the police department decides, do we file it in municipal court or do we file it in district court? So this ensures that regardless of that decision where police make to file the case, that the person will be treated the same, equally in both courts.
Okay, and then I remember one of the questions that I asked you was, how many cities are currently being looked into by how many cities has this really applied to so far?
We know of litigation impacting 2 cities, one that's been resolved when the city amended its municipal code with a very similar provision here after it had been appealed through the state courts, and the second one that is currently pending that is challenging a sentence imposed in a municipal court. On the first case, which involved the city of Rifle, the ACLU did weigh in and wrote a compelling amicus brief in favor of the position that state courts and city courts are required by the Equal Protection Clause to have the same penalty assessed for the same conduct.
Okay, that answers my question. I don't know. I have some concerns about this and about our home rule authority, and how this may violate our home rule authority. And so can you address that a little bit?
Yes, in fact, I just read an appellate brief from one of the pending cases, and they addressed that very issue, which I thought was very timely. The city has home rule authority, so we can adopt our own laws within the city. However, those laws can't violate the Constitution, either state or federal, nor can they conflict with a uniformly applicable state law. And Councilmember Russell and I discussed the need for a study session on home rule authority to discuss exactly what that means and how it interacts with Colorado Constitution and Colorado state law. Because if it has statewide application and there's a state law on it, we can't then change that. But what we're talking about here is the Colorado Constitution and the federal Constitution equal protection clauses. And home rule authority doesn't give us, we can't change those.
Right. So I did read an article in the CML Legal Corner. Actually, I read a couple. I think it probably was the March one and the April one, and one of them talked about this situation. And actually, at the end of that article, it said that if we were thinking about doing anything, that we could contact CML for more information. And I'm wondering if that might be, a good thing for us.
We certainly could. We've done our own research internally, which is why we brought forth this recommendation. It protects the city from potential legal challenge. It also protects PD from a claim that they forum shopped based on who a person is or who a class of people are. But we certainly could reach out to CML for a second opinion. And I did just remember you had another question about the additional work this would cause municipal court if we were to adopt this. A few things. I don't think it would cause much additional work, if any, for several reasons. First, our city assistant city attorney has presented previously on the state sentencing guidelines, so we could provide training to municipal court on what those guidelines are. It's a one-page sheet. We also had proposed a standard fine schedule, and we would be happy to amend that to ensure that it's the same as any state maximum to be able to guide the judge, but it would be up to the judge
whether or not to accept that. I've also directed our contract prosecutor not to make any sentence recommendation that exceeds the maximum allowed under state law. And in addition, we're here to provide legal advice and opinions to every city department, including municipal court. So if they have any questions about the maximum sentences for each offense where we have concurrent jurisdiction, we would be more than happy to provide a memo to the judge to guide in sentencing.
So I appreciate that. And I also asked you another question that there is nothing urgent. It wouldn't put us at risk if we tabled this for a certain period of time. And we talked about the home rule authority, but I've also been thinking the judge is coming to speak with council. Is that soon?
I don't think we have a set date, but it's going to be late July or early August. As
Late-
part of the budget conversations, if that's what you mean.
Okay, as part of the budget conversation, is it possible that some of this conversation about this could come up in that same meeting, or that wouldn't really work?
It's possible it could be discussed at that meeting. I personally did reach out to municipal court prior to drafting this to get their thoughts and opinions on it. And municipal court administrator Kenitha Julian told me they did not oppose it. But if further discussion is needed, that's completely within your discretion. I think we are protected as long as we limit sentencing to no more than what is allowed under current state law.
And currently, in the last several months, have we violated that? Have we sentenced anybody to more than what state law limits us to?
That I don't know. I'm not, I have a contract prosecutor, so I'm not in court, so I don't know what they sentence. All I know is I've directed the contract prosecutor to not make a sentencing recommendation that exceeds what's allowed under state law, but it's my understanding he doesn't always make a sentencing recommendation.
Okay. I appreciate that. That answers all of my questions. Part of the reason my question that was on the sheet that you knew was, why was this put on consent agenda in the first place? I did get an answer to that, but I want to be.
Actually, Member Russell, before you go there, because I know Member Wright has a question.
Okay.
And then I'll let you make a comment. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Member Wright.
Thank you. You had said that there were two cities that you said Rifle, I believe. Is Aurora the other one? Because hasn't Aurora gone with shoplifting just to the dark side where they put down the hammer?
So I don't have first-hand experience. I can tell you the other city that we know of that's currently litigating this is not Aurora, but I don't think they would appreciate us publicly announcing it's an ongoing case.
Okay.
So I don't think they'd want us to announce it, but I do understand that Aurora has enhanced the penalty for shoplifting, and
So I guess that's where I'm kind of confused. And Member Russell said, I do think a study session would be really good then, because I think of what Aurora is doing, or another city, and what they're doing. They're taking just a really hard stance on their penalties and stuff, and I don't think anybody else is. And then say the rifle case, and it also causes me to question, depending on all the cases that the state could change the laws. Okay, this is what you could charge for this case, and this is what the jail penalty could be. In a year, they turn around and change it, and if you don't follow that guideline, I guess, or that rule, or that shall or may, I don't know, then the municipal level could end up getting in trouble by the state. And that's what I fear, opposed to, okay, well, we'll look at that as a guideline. We'll stay under that the radar, but we're gonna follow home rule, but we'll make sure we don't become another city that's just taking a really hard line so that we don't end up getting sued. So I almost agree that I think I need more information, I guess.
Well, and that's one of the things Councilmember Russell and I discussed today, is that it's my job to minimize the city's liability and to recommend policies and code changes that would minimize the likelihood that we would get sued. But that's not necessarily council's role, because council's role, just like I understand City of Aurora did, said we don't care about this litigation. We're willing to fight this, and we're willing to spend city money to fight this because policy-wise, we think this is the right thing to do. And it's your role to make those policy decisions. And I can't, in my role, I can't recommend that we do something knowing there's a high likelihood of at least being involved in a lawsuit.
Right, and their situation may be different. I mean, their amount of shoplifting maybe much more higher than ours. I mean, how many malls do they have compared to, shops and stuff than us? It just, I don't know. I think it's apples to oranges, perhaps. I don't know.
Thank you, Member Wright. Any other questions?
Actually-
Well, go ahead, Member Russell.
Okay, so there is the one thing that I did talk about with city attorney was council is responsible to make policy. And I really feel like any talk about any policy hasn't really happened. And that's why it kind of surprised me that this went on consent agenda. I know there have been some discussions in one-on-ones, and that was the other article that I read in the CML Legal Corner was rubber stamping, and which means we discuss things behind the scenes. It comes in, we get it put on consent agenda, and then we vote on it, and there's no discussion. What I want, and what you're doing may be absolutely what we need to do. But I would like for us to talk about this somewhat. I mean, some of it, whatever you want to advise us, as far as our attorney-client privilege, could be done in executive session. And then there are things that we could talk about in the policy and what we want done. I think Aurora is becoming more hardline on crime. I've seen articles in the paper recently about enforcing petty vehicle offenses and things like that. This council needs to talk about that, because I do think we have some issues here. Even some people that came tonight about problems they have in their neighborhood. It's policy issues that we need to decide and give direction. And I think it could apply to this. But from what I'm understanding more, I think maybe what you're suggesting is the right thing, but I really would like to table it until we could talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thank you, Member Russell. So I agree with the fact that we do have to have, and I know I'm kind of speaking out of turn here because we don't have a motion on the table, but just depending on where council decides to go with this item for tonight. So kind of speaking out of order here, but what there is a need for us to have a conversation in study session about home rule and state laws, because I think there have been a couple of items that have come up in the past where we did pull off a consent agenda and just had to have a discussion beforehand. So I definitely think that we need to have that discussion. I'm fine voting on the item as is tonight, but having that larger discussion on the study session moving forward. I'm not sure how the rest of council feels. Obviously, when we're trying to put together the consent agenda, I have a brief snippet of what the item is. So didn't realize how big of an issue this potentially could have been, but I'll leave it to council. I'm not sure where you guys stand. If you want to have a study session before this gets decided, or if we just vote on this and still have the study session. I'm fine with just making a motion and then seeing where that goes, and if we vote on it, we vote on it. If not, but
A motion for a study session?
no, a motion to approve the item for tonight. I'm fine with making that tonight and just seeing where it lies, but go ahead, Member Russell.
Do we have to make a motion since it's on the agenda and then decide after that point if we want to table it or not? Or could we decide that we wanted to table it even at the beginning?
You could make a motion to table it to a date uncertain without the motion pending.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to table this 9A1 to a date uncertain.
Thank you, Member Russell.
I second that.
Thank you, Member Wright. Date uncertain. All right, I'll just weigh in. I will be voting against tabling this item. I feel I have enough information to vote on it as is, but I understand your concern. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll support the motion to table. I don't see any particular urgency with this that it couldn't wait a little while.
Thank you,
For
Member
the sake
Rand.
of everyone's information.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Nay.
Let the record show 5 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, City Attorney Niles, for that. So we'll get it back on the, well, first we'll get the study session on the agenda, and then we'll figure out after that date when to get it on the item. Thank you, Member Russell. The next one up is Member Russell. This is from you as well. This is for Economic Development Manager Darren Hollingsworth. Do you have the question for Mr. Hollingsworth? Member Russell, I may have it, so.
Okay. I do have.
Okay, go ahead.
I do have some questions.
Go ahead.
Here, but it may not be what I put on there. One of the questions I have is what if the applicant fails the energy audit or the lead testing? What happens when they apply for the E3 grant, but they find things in the energy audit or in the energy audit or the lead-based paint testing?
Councilmember Russell, I believe this is the Arapahoe County Enterprise Zone Administrative Grant to receive funds for the administration of the enterprise zone and unrelated to the E3 grant. So that, I believe that's another agenda item coming up later on in the agenda, but I'm here to discuss and happy to answer any questions about the ordinance pertaining to a grant that we're receiving this year for administrative funds to support the Arapahoe County Enterprise Zone.
So isn't this the community development block grant?
No,
No,
And that's 9C2.
we're on 9A2, sorry.
Oh, you're not, oh, okay, I didn't pull that one.
Actually, no, you did. I think you did. No, you didn't. Sorry.
Okay.
That was my mistake. That should have been on consent agenda. You did not pull it either, right? Remember, right? Yeah, that was me. All right,
Can I
sorry
make a
about
motion?
that.
Just make a motion on
Let's
that
just
one
make a
now?
motion.
I move to approve 9A2.
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Member Russell. All right. See no comments. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Apologies, Darian, and apologies, Member Russell. The next one up is 9C2, and I believe Member Russell and, I'm not sure if you had a question either, Member Wright, but Member Russell, go ahead. We have Deputy Administrator Nancy Fenton.
Good evening, Ms. Fenton.
Good evening. I also have Jeremy Fink, the Community Development Administrator from Arapahoe County here, in case there were questions.
Okay.
And I'm unable to answer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When I was reading through the packet, it said that it's required for applicants to have an energy audit first and testing of lead-based paint in the area. What would happen if they found that those were bigger priorities than what they, so if they find lead-based paint, does that have to be addressed before they can get their grant money?
So addressing the energy audit is a requirement, because what it can do is it prioritizes the order of things for the homeowner to receive their most energy efficiency. So for example, I may want windows, but when the audit company comes in, they may find that I'm going to receive more a return on my investment if I put in attic insulation. So that's how they prioritize within the energy audit. And then the homeowner is required to do it in the order of the audit. For lead-based paint tests, it's a separate company who comes in and they do dust samples. if lead is found in the paint, they still receive their grant money. So the homeowner receives a lead safety practice book. It's their, excuse me, their responsibility to inform their contractor that they're going to hire to do the work, so that contractor can follow the safe practices.
Okay, so
But
I
they
mean,
still get their grant.
right, they still get the grant, but, and it may not, if they're not disturbing any of the paint, it may not impact that at all.
Correct.
Okay, and I just asked that question, why were we required to put the entire city budget in the application?
Jeremy can answer that if you'd like, but it is a requirement for the application.
I'm happy to answer that. Do you mind coming up to the microphone? We need to make sure that the public can hear this as well.
So Jeremy Finn, Community Development Administrator for Arapahoe County. Part of that request, it's a request made for each entity that's applying for funds. As it's applicable to municipalities, it's to determine whether or not we're essentially supplanting federal funds for a program that would have been funded with municipal funds.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So we, if you had earmarked, X amount for E3, we couldn't just directly substitute federal funds for that project.
Right, okay, and that's good to know. So, I have, in my 8+ years tenure, I have rarely voted in favor of this. And I know, there's something about affirmatively furthering fair housing. I didn't see that in the application this time, although I'm pretty sure it's probably still a requirement. I know that Douglas County, they voted not to accept community development block grants probably 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And it was for that reason, because there's something about that. Do you know anything what I'm talking about?
I do. Do you want to address that? I do know that that particular act and bill went back under some revisions, and can't speak to why Douglas County didn't take the funding, but basically what affirmatively furthering fair housing does is it expands the original Fair Housing Act. So where that was a discrimination against certain, class of people, this now expands, so we can't segregate. We can't say, we're putting all our low-income people in this part of the city. And it tends to affect more larger cities, such as Chicago or Denver. But Jeremy, if you know anything about the Douglas County or want to expand on that?
Yeah, so the AFFH was essentially taken off the books. It was never on the books, but it was assumed to be a requirement for HUD programs. It is no longer actively a requirement. There are talks, I believe, to seek public comment and potentially bring that back as a requirement, but it is not an active requirement. I will say that some of what was said in I'm speculating, potential reasons for Douglas County opting out of receiving CDBG funds specifically, they never received home funds or ESG, other HUD programs. Was that requirement, but I think there was a lot of misinformation about federal overreach and whether or not the accepting federal funds or HUD funds would, in a sense, supersede local zoning or land use control. And I think that's been proven to be a false narrative. The local control and zoning, land use control, that's a municipal issue. Accepting HUD funds is not going to dictate that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for that information.
All right, any other questions? If not, can I get a motion to approve 9C2?
I move to approve 9C2.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Noonencamp. Any further comments? Member Russell?
I do appreciate the information that just came forth, and I see that it's necessary to do this, but the one thing that I know that Mr. Kozak has brought up is about limiting public comment to citizens in Inglewood only, and it's because of federal monies that we get and state monies that we get could impact. So I'm just saying, if we chose to eliminate hearing from people for public comment from the state and the federal, from other places in the state and the country, then the bottom line is things like this this funding could be withdrawn from us. So I will support this time because I know it's needed, and there's a lot of hurting people in this city. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. And with that, I think we have the motion. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Nanenkamp.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Member Wright.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you very much, Jeremy. All right, we have no public hearing items tonight, no ordinances, resolutions, or motions, so just a general discussion, mayor's choice. For mayor's choice, so I'll just address the public comment issues. I know I received calls about the public comment regarding, and basically what I've said to citizens in the past is that, I can't limit you to speak on whatever forum you would want to speak to. If you want to join a podcast, you can. What I'm hoping for, though, moving forward is that, we always get criticism here on the dais. And I understand that there's times that we do want to, respond to our character or how they're treating staff, things like that. I'm hoping we don't continue going down the path of how we've conducted public comment recently. For me, it just feels like we're antagonizing some of the public, and I think that we're possibly making things worse. And so we're here taking public comment once every 2 weeks. And for me, what concerns me is that if we are to continue moving down this path with public comment, I worry about the fact that it's our staff, anybody that's visiting City Center, they're the ones that are going to be seeing the impact of what our words are saying up here. So I'm hoping we could reframe from that. Obviously, there's not much I can do in terms of just how you want to respond to things, but those are the things that I'm kind of considering. I know that staff, I know the police, everyone has heightened their concern about what could possibly happen. So I just want us to take that into consideration when we are responding to members of the public, because I don't believe that what we're trying to accomplish is actually helping the matter. It feels like it's making things a little bit worse, but obviously that's for each of us to decide how we want to respond moving forward. Lastly, what I do want to say is it's June, so it is a terrible transition here, but happy Pride Month to our LGBTQ community. I know that this is a month of celebration, but I also understand that this could be a time where vile comments increase. So just know, for me, just know that I see you, I stand with you, and if there's any way that I can become a better ally, please let me know. But happy Pride Month, and I hope that everybody celebrates. So thank you. Anyone else for council member's choice? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to inform council of an event I took part of last Friday. The acting HUD Secretary, Adrian Todman, came to Inglewood Housing Authority and invited both me and the mayor. The mayor wasn't able to make it to the event, but I was able to participate in that. We went over to Orchard Place and took a tour of the building with the acting secretary as well as our Congressman Jason Crow, and I got to spend some time interacting with them about the housing crisis in Inglewood, which is of course nationwide as well, and speak to what we're doing here in Inglewood. So it was a good event, and kind of an honor to be a part of that just discussion with those two as well.
Yeah, it's great that they visited Inglewood. So very good. Member Wright.
I had the pleasure of my granddaughter's company all last week, and I am here to tell the tale. And during that time, we got to explore a lot of the activities within Inglewood. So, broke in the train several times, and it was wonderful. I encourage everybody, and we although the farm is on the floodplain, got to see the alpacas and the pigs and all the fun things. And I encourage everybody in Inglewood to visit our new train and the farm. We went to Pirates Cove and stuff. It was fantastic. I hate to say it, but I've never been to Pirates Cove before, but just, one of those older people that just don't do that. So, and it was a great time. So I just want to thank all of the staff and everybody for being so kind and wonderful and accommodating, because it's so hard to keep track of 3 wild children. And I appreciate everybody being so wonderful at everywhere we toured within the city. So I appreciate everybody for everything.
Thank you, Member Wright. I see no others. City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one bright, big good news. We received word today from the Inglewood Depot that the grant that they applied for from the State Historical Fund was approved, and that totals $248,362. Since this council did authorize a letter of support, just wanted to let you all know that good news. And we'll be working with them on the permits and different things that they need to complete that work. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, City Manager. Congratulations to the Parsons. That's great news. Looking forward to what they do with the grant funding. With that, everyone, the meeting is now adjourned. We'll see you all. One last thing. Next week, it's Board and Commissions meetings. Monday night, we're starting at 5 p.m. We have 2 nights. The second night will start at 6 o'clock. But sorry for the late reply. I meant to say that as part of Mayor's Choice. But 5 p.m. next week for
On the 3rd floor?
3rd floor, and we'll be here present. All right. Everyone have a great evening.